Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2022 FIDE Women's Candidates. I'm Women FIDE Master Alessia Santeramo, and my co-host today is the one and only Anna Maria Kazarian, Women International Master.
Thank you so much, Alessia. Welcome, everyone. We're back with the women's candidates, and I'm beyond excited for today's match. We were in the quarterfinals earlier, and there were two very exciting matches, but now we're back to only one match. Who do we have today, Alessia?
Yes, so what do we have? We are at the semi-final game 2, so let's have a look at the remaining field. We know already that in Pool A there is one winner. Her name is Lei Tinjay. And there is just one among Alexandra Goryachkina and Tan Shengyi that will take the spot of winner of Pool B, challenging the winner of Pool A. So this is the match we have, Alexandra Goryachkina versus Tan Shengyi. Yesterday we saw already what happened, Anna Maya. The game was very long, very intense, lots of fight. Tan Shengyi had a small chance in the end game, but then Goryachkina defended so well that the game ended in a draw. Not a Berlin draw, right?
No, indeed. It took a very long time, as you said. It was almost 100 moves, so the players fought till the very end. And it was really impressive to see, indeed, how Goryachkina was able to defend, because it was a very tough position. Her opponent had really strong pieces, but she managed to hold the position. So let's see what they have in store for us today.
Yes, indeed. Let's have a look at the bracket so we see what happened and where we are leading to. So we saw last week the quarterfinals of Pool B, Goryachkina versus Kostenyuk, Lagno versus Tan Shengyi. We saw some very exciting quarterfinals, and now we are at the semi-final. We see that there is already half points for each player. Game 1 was played yesterday, and today we are back for Game 2. But just one can be the winner of Pool B. Of Pool B, yes. So, which one are your prediction, Anamaya? Yesterday we were not commentating, so we were not saying any prediction about this match. And what are you feeling about this?
Yeah, I mean, luckily for us, the game ended in a draw, so it feels like both players still have chances. If one player would have won, that already is a big lead in this format. But if I have to compare, basically, I was going to say that Goryachkina is a favorite in this match. But seeing how Tan Shengyi played yesterday, the tables have turned, in my opinion. It can be anyone's game, and given the way that Tan Shengyi has been playing recently, the tie breaks and yesterday as well, I think she was just warming up in her first match, and we are going to see some fire from her today as well.
Dang, I really agree with that. We saw a completely, a really important change for Tan Shengyi. She started the match with having some hard position against Katerina Lagno. She had to defend many times. And then in the tiebreak, she won game 1 and then she became a beast. Really, things have changed. And it was everything's so different. And so I'm curious. Yesterday she was pushing. I'm curious what will happen today. One thing is not changing: the fact that she's always the last one to reach the table.
Yeah, that's a very noticeable. Alexandra Goryachkina, we see now on the camera, she's sitting down, adjusting the pieces, and well, actually, she's doing that just now, but she's getting ready. It's so important, those routines, to get ready for the game. But here we have the prize fund distribution, everyone. Total prize fund of this event is 250,000 euros, with the winner going home with 60,000 euros. And second place goes home with 50,000 euros. So the players today, they're fighting for that 50,000 euros, because the person that advances wins at least this prize money, and the person that doesn't advance wins 30,000 euros. It's not bad at all, but you definitely want to win here.
Yes, indeed. And it's curious that the jump between third and fourth place is 20,000 euro, and then the jump between the runner-up and the champion is 10 extra thousand. It's surprising that there is this jump, but of course, this shows that each game makes such a difference, also from an economical point of view. And so who wins this match just brings home 20,000 euro more, which is not bad. I think anyone in the chat would love to take this extra cash, including the commentators, right? Let's have a look at the format. let's have a look at the format. So we started with the 8-player single elimination bracket knockout. We have already seen the bracket. Winner plays Wenjun, the current world champion, in the world championship match. Each match is of 4 games. The first 2.5 points wins. And the time control is classical chess. It means 90 minutes plus 30 seconds of increment after each move. And then there is an important increment. 30 more minutes are added at move 40. I think that we are about to see the game start. I see both players at the board. We saw before Goryachkina was cleaning the board. I don't know if you noticed that, but she was really going with the hands all around the board, trying to clean it. Maybe the arbiter didn't remove any small details.
Yeah, it can get really dusty on the board, right? I mean, it really depends, but I can definitely see why. I mean, it tends to get dusty, and you want to clean it up a little bit, and it also just gets you ready. It's we all have our routines to get ready, and to have a clean board is one of the important ones.
What's your routine, Anamaya? Now that you said, I'm very curious to hear.
Ooh, I typically like adjusting my pieces to the squares that I always adjust them to. I always like to put my knights diagonally towards the center, even though I haven't moved them yet. And yeah, that's about it. I want to keep my pieces set up well, the way that I like it. I guess everyone has their personal way of doing it. Some people don't really care. They just do whatever. But I'm like, okay, I need to have this pointing there. The bishops need to be diagonally pointing there. I don't know. It's everyone has their own way. I'm actually not sure. I mean, I think other than that, I don't really have a routine. I just want to get ready and get started. And I do get early sometimes to my board, but it takes so much time till it gets started. But if I go there late to the playing hall, I feel like I'm in a rush and don't have time to relax. So I find it important to get early, even though I have to wait for a long time.
Yes, indeed. I also prefer to go a bit earlier on the chessboard, like 2-3 minutes before, just that I'm trying to adjust my pieces. I like to have to place the knights just on the side so that it keeps an eye on the commander and an eye on the ball. So this is my way of doing. And generally, I just make sure that I have water, I have a tea, and I also bring always a banana with me just to have some good energy.
Good.
That not too much sugar, but banana gives you good energy through the whole entire game. So this is a bit my way of doing. I see that they don't have much food. We couldn't see much from the board. Maybe it's not allowed to have food on the board. Maybe they have on the background where we can't see, they have a spot where there is some food, coffee. Probably there will be something like that.
Yeah, I see something at the front here. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe it's some sort of sandwich or something. But it's definitely not the tanjongis. And the handshake is there. The game has started. Let's see what the first move is.
And D4. Here we have on the board. I was saying to Anamaya before the commentary was starting that I really am not a huge fan of D4. I really like to play E4 and all the games that arise, but this is what we got, guys. It's very similar opening to yesterday, no? Okay, a change. We have C6, so we have the Slav defense.
Right, yeah, yesterday we had this move E6, and later after knight F6 there was some A6 move, and it was a different position. But now we're in the Slav defense. I'm curious to see which line they will go for, because there's many lines here, and it can get pretty tactical, I would say. What do you think, Alessia?
Yes, indeed. There are some lines where you can go really very sharp. You can take on black and take on C4, then there are very, very sharp things going on. I'm not an expert in this variation because I don't play any of these. I've studied a bit of Slav. Once I tried to play 1d4, then I say no. I said not my thing, and I went back to play my e4. But you know, Anamaya, I just want to ask shortly our chat if they are a fan of the move 1e4 or 1d4. So just write which one is your favorite first move. I'm very curious to get an impression of what chat would like. And then Amaya, what's your favorite first move?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from chat as well. There's always a divided opinion on this, but my favorite is e4. I do have to admit, I did play d4 myself a few times, but e4 remains the favorite. And as you said, I also faced the Slav, and I was like, okay, how am I actually putting my pieces? Where do I develop them? And if you don't really know how to play here with white pieces, it can get really difficult from my experience. It shouldn't be difficult, but for some reason it was for me. And yeah, you always need to know what you're doing, of course. But yeah, I didn't have really bad experience with D4, but it's just completely different. It's too solid, and I would like to play my move E4, and I can't.
Well, maybe one day you can play bishop g5, pin the knight. But you know, now we are in a semi-Slav. Semi-Slav meaning that black played already the move e6. And now you see this pawn structure e6, d5, c6. It's like called the semi-Slav. It's a mixture between the Orthodox that we had yesterday and the Slav that it seemed like being today. So it might lead to some situation that where one of the plan for white is exactly what Anamaya would love to do. So to push on e4. Something that you do very slowly, you have to build up. Mostly white starts to go with e3, bishop d3, castle, just very slow. And then at one point, there will be queen c2. You remove the knight, maybe knight d2, and then you can try to go for e4. It's one of the plan in this structure, so maybe they will make Hanamaya happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I see you have a fan of the chat, Alessia. Caucasian Andy says 1g4. That's his favorite move.
Yeah, of course. Also, Dead3 loves the move G4. I mean, there are some crazy lender in chat, so they like the move 1G4. But of course, 1G4 is a move that comes with the suggestion, don't try this at home. Is probably one of the worst first move for white. It's fun to play and can lead to sharp positions where your opponent might be completely surprised and might lose up to a rook in the first 5 moves. But okay, it's for sure not something that at top level they should play. They should be playing, even if Magnus Carlsen in the Title Tuesday and in many online event has been playing this 1G4, 1G5 against Nakamura and all the top grandmasters. And I was so proud of our world champion.
Wow. All right. That's pretty cool to see. But it seems like in the chat, the majority loves the d4 move on the first move. So looks like a lot of people in the chat will be happy with today's game. But what we're seeing currently, Alessia, we're seeing a trade on d5. What does this mean?
Well, this means a lot of things. First of all, let's go back to the situation where the pawns on c4 and d6 are on the board.
Yes.
Because I want to highlight one possible plan for black that I really like to show. So let's put a move on the board e3, bishop e7, bishop d3. So at this point, when white is moving the light square bishop already once, black has the following plan. To take on c4, you are making white lose once more time the tempo, moving again the bishop. And then black is going on with the move a6, b5. Well, let's see, yeah, a6, b5, bishop b7, and c5. And it's lovely to see how black developed so well the queen side, placing the bishop on c8, that right now is a bit blocked, but placing on a big diagonal, then pushing on c5. c5 is challenging the center. So when I play this with black, when I started to play chess, I used to play d4, d5 with black, and these plans helped me so much to just know an easy way to develop all my pieces. That's why I find it always the exchange variation, let's go back to the current position, the most challenging for white, or for black. Because you take, and now black doesn't have anymore the opportunity to go for d takes c4. Do we have some more moves, Anamaya?
Yeah, we do. We have e3, bishop e7, and bishop d3. This is the current position. So yeah, I also love this in this love to play this line that you just mentioned, and it gives you so many opportunities. But indeed, Tanjongi is not allowing this, and this is bringing us to Carlsbad type of structure in the Queen's Gambit, and it's probably one of the worst structures to deal with the black pieces. I mean, I've studied this structure many times because I was playing this with the black pieces often, so I kind of knew I had to study this to know what I'm doing. But every single time I saw really nice attacking games from white, and once I played this game, yeah, it was against a strong player. It was, I believe, in the Olympiad, and I was with the black pieces, and I had to defend all game. It was not fun, and I knew that I was just playing for a draw. I could either lose or draw, and there was no way for me to win. I managed to draw because she missed a small chance to win, but it was the worst ever. And I played this line many more times, but every single time, same conclusion. It's not fun. So I really like what Alexander Goryachkina is doing here, because knight e4 is changing up the pace of this position. Typically, these kind of moves are not really played. I mean, you go for short castle. You play it very easy normally. But knight e4, it seems like it works tactically. How do you feel about this move, Alessia?
Wow, I just wanted to ask you to check shortly in the book and how many times is this move played on the Chesscom database? Because it feels like is a very direct move. You want to exchange some pieces. This is the idea. You're challenging the bishop on g5. And I'm curious because if this works for black, black is solving immediately so many problems. Black has less space, lots of pieces. You see right now the bishop on c8 has no way to go to play, to enter the game, has no way to be developed. So black needs to castle, and then where is the knight on d7 going? Mostly rook e1, sometimes knight f8. So it's a very slow way of developing pieces. Reason why, if knight on e4 is working, then you might trade lots of pieces, and naturally your bishop on c8 will have a way to get out and plays the game.
Yeah, exactly. So I just briefly checked, and it seems like short castle is indeed the top move, played 1952 times. And second place is knight e4 with a bare number of 255 games. So that's in comparison of short castle. It's not a lot, but it's still the second move. And it actually has quite a decent score for black, 28% win percentage for black, which is quite a lot, because short castle has a win percentage for black of 17%. So maybe this is the new theory. This is how it should be played.
Maybe. This is very interesting. And let's put this move on the board right now that we have. Because I think that here, oh, okay, we have already a move. It's bishop f4.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go ahead and bring us to the current position.
Yeah, don't worry, not a lot happened, but this is the current position.
Okay, but we can maybe discuss each of his move, of this move. I feel like after knight e4, the bishop on g5 has needs to reply to an important question. Do you trade? Do you go back? What are you doing? One more option could be also to consider taking on e5, but I'm not sure if it works from a tactical point of view.
Yeah.
And of course, what white doesn't want to do is to trade too many pieces, for the reason we explained before, that black has a bit an hard time to develop everything. So bishop f4 sounds so logical, just keeping the bishop. You don't want to trade a bishop for the knight. This bishop is considered, if we see the pawn structure, the dark square bishop on g5 is the bad bishop. But this is a very important example. If that bishop would be on c1, then yes, that bishop would be very bad. But the bishop is outside the box, meaning that, yes, the pawn structure f2, e3, d4 would block that bishop. But as soon as the bishop is out, that bishop is so strong. So white wants to keep it. It makes lots of sense. Let's go back on it. Let's go on f4.
Yeah.
And now what did black play?
Knight d to f6, which is interesting. I mean, you're basically strengthening the position of the knight, and you're also making space for this bishop. So one might say that the move bishop f4 is to simply avoid all those trades. And if you trade pieces with the white pieces, you're helping your opponent. Black loves to trade in this position. to get more space. But after knight d to f6, I really like the prospects of this bishop because it won't be stuck on c8 now. It will be able to develop to f5, maybe to again go to g6, maybe even to g4. And I really like where this potential is now of the bishop. So white played the move queen c2, simply developing the queen. Seems like a really logical move to me. I mean, obviously you can also play short castle, but yeah, at least you're challenging this knight over here. And this is the current position, Alessia. Black played the move short castle. What do you think of this position?
This is very interesting. There are lots of consideration I want to do, but we will get there in a short time. I want to remind everyone of chat that there is a prediction going on. How will the game go today? Will Tan win? Will Goryachkina win? Or will be a draw? I see like the bar of the draw spiking quite a lot, meaning that people really believe in a draw, in one more draw. I understand it, but guys, you have 1 more minute, 50 seconds to predict so that we can have fun together and see who has the right result. Going back to the position, I want to I want to go back shortly a few moves. Short castle, let's bring it back. Yes, and before queen c2 here.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I know that we chess player have the tendency to do trades when they are possible. It's much harder to keep the tension rather than do the trade. I have this attitude that when there is a trade, I tend to do it much more than leaving it there because it's hard to calculate all the possible options every time that you don't do a trade. So, for example, now white has many moves available. No, white can take on e4 with the knight or with the bishop. If white takes with the knight, of course, let's show it there is an amazing fork, and that's why you shouldn't do this. Of course, this is forbidden.
Forbidden. Don't touch your knight.
But one possibility for white that you always need to consider is to take with the bishop, because you are creating a possible vulnerable point. So after d take e4, let's put this move on the board, there could be knight d2, and now this pawn is attacked twice. And then you can keep going with the attack with queen c2. So this is something that both players always need to consider, because as you can imagine, if you win that pawn, that would be amazing. You win an extra pawn, you have a good center, active pieces. You give up the bishop pair, which is a pity in an open position, but an extra pawn is an extra pawn, so it will not be bad. Now, I think that this is not working. That's why white didn't play. If we go back, maybe black gets the possibility to take with the knight first, which is better. And now after knight takes, pawn takes, knight d2, already we see that black has even the possibility to defend with f5, bishop f5, queen d5. There are so many defensive moves that I don't think it's worth it to give up the bishop pair to get to this position. That's why white is not taking on e4, and that's why it's not possible to take on d4 in the next few moves.
Yeah, very well said. And that goes to show you have to be careful. Every single time you have the opportunity to trade pieces, you have to evaluate the position before and after the trade. What is going to happen if I take with the bishop this knight on e4? And obviously, knight takes is not a move you can consider, but it's always tempting to trade your bishop for a knight or the other way around, especially. But in this situation, the reason why knight e4, this move earlier, is all right is for the simple reason that white cannot capture it. Bishop takes e4 is not a great move. And that's why Tan Jung-gi played the move queen c2. And what is interesting to me is that black played the move short castle. So you might think, okay, but Tan Jung-gi is attacking this knight on e4 3 times and is only defended twice. So how does it work tactically? So I have a feeling that tactically speaking, it doesn't really work out well. Let's put the moves on the board. So imagine knight takes e4 happens. What are the moves here for black? So after d takes e4, bishop takes e4. What is going on here tactically? Because there is a reason why this wasn't captured. Oh, I think I'm spotting. There are some tactical issues here. Queen a5 check is a problem. So let's say knight takes e4. That seems really reasonable to get rid of that bishop at least. And I was gonna say queen a5 check seems really reasonable to give a check, and then after 92, maybe there's bishop f5. But Mr. Engine is pointing out, do you know which move is pointed out by the engine?
Well, bishop b4 is something that looks really, really interesting too. There is knight
Yeah.
d2, and then I don't see a follow-up, but could be maybe bishop b4, knight d2, you take on d2, king takes, then queen a5, something like this, maybe.
Okay, this will probably surprise you and the audience as well, but the best move here that is, okay, more or less the only one that is giving you clear advantage is g5.
Oh my god, that's so cool that you showed this. Wow, okay, let's try to understand this move because it's pretty like hidden. So of course you cannot take on g5, right? Because there is now queen a5 check. Yes.
Or that too, yeah.
Or, yeah, of course, yeah, not even needed to take
Or you can give a fancy check and then take. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, because you improve the position. Because you give a check, you make the king lose the possibility to castle, and then you take the knight. So actually, it's the most precise way to keep going.
I agree with you. Let's go back to the position. So bishop takes g5 doesn't work. What else do we have?
Okay, let's try to place bishop on g3, which is a very normal way to just move away the bishop. And now I still feel like there are ideas to keep going with queen a5 or bishop b4. And I feel this looks really strong. And I have the feeling that sooner or later, white will lose the possibility to castle. Black will have the bishop here. Black has also the possibility to play at some point the move c5, opening up the center. And this queen on e4, as you pointed out, could be maybe trapped at some point. Let's imagine queen a5 and bishop f4. And the question is, where is the queen going?
Yeah, indeed. I think the problem now here is that there's knight d2, and that frees up this square f3. But indeed, queen a5, it is threatening to move bishop f5. And if white plays the move like king f1, you'll have a problem.
Well, the bishop is hanging on e7. That's the small problem.
Oh yeah, that is also a problem.
That's the small problem. But yeah, this is something is something very interesting. I really want to let's spend some more time on this because I want to understand what is happening. Why this move bishop g3 should lead to something uncomfortable for black. Could be even f5 maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Apparently f5 is the best move here, and that's for the simple reason that you're attacking the queen. So let's put it on the board. Queen has to leave after f5, so let's say it goes here. And the problem is this bishop is getting trapped. f4. Not only are you opening up the position after pawn takes, but this bishop is not going anywhere. So
oh my god,
it's crazy that out of nowhere this bishop can get trapped. And earlier you may think, okay, but if I move my bishop to e5 instead of g3, well, I'll begin with f6 first, and we'll continue the plan after that. And that goes to show this bishop doesn't have many squares, and it's pretty typical, I would say. I mean, it doesn't really happen often that a bishop gets trapped like this, but it's pretty typical in these kind of pawn structures that the bishop doesn't have many squares. So you want to include h3 somewhere to park your bishop on a safe square, but white didn't have time for that.
No, Anamaya, I'm thinking that this is such a lovely trap for blitz play. I mean, you just go very early with the knight on e4, and then you like pretend like blundering the pawn, and yeah, I mean, it can be that white is capturing here because it's very hidden this g5 f5, and that's really interesting. I mean, I can say to our viewers, you might want to try this out in some blitz game. And the lovely thing about opening traps is that there are opening traps that are bad if your opponent knows it, and then there is this move that is just very interesting, is solid. You can play this even in classical chess, and just if your opponent doesn't know it, is a big problem for them. But if they know it, is also not a problem for you. You just get a fight in the normal position, like Goryachkina is getting here. So that's so beautiful. You can leave the knight on e4 in a way, like offering a pawn, but that's a huge bait.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really interesting to see that both players played out the move so quickly that it seems like they are aware that this tactic is in the position. And okay, Tanjaki did spend 2 minutes on a short castle, so she didn't play this instantly. But if you spend 2 minutes on this move and you don't take on e4, that means a lot. Either you're familiar with the idea at least, or you simply know the position and was just making sure that you cannot capture on e4. But yeah, that goes to show this works tactically, and indeed, I'm taking notes here. I mean, as I said before, this pawn structure is so difficult for black because only white can create weaknesses here in black's position. And it's really hard to see where white's weaknesses are. The only weakness in this position, I would say, is square e4, which black is dominating very well. And that goes to show, I feel like this line is quite revolutionary in this position because look how much space black suddenly has. Typically, black's pieces are tied down together and they're not able to move freely. They're stuck. But here it looks like black's position is simply flourishing.
Yes, indeed. I feel like as soon as that knight on e4 is staying there, black is having really a good time. My question is now, what can white do to make that knight on e4 feel uncomfortable? And one idea was to play just a simple move h3 at some point. Of course, now we have already another move on the board that is a very concrete move, bishop d6, challenging the bishop on f4. So we have to consider very well what to do next. But generally, considering the idea we have seen before with the bishop potentially getting trapped, the move h3 sounds like some very logical continuation, giving to the bishop one extra square on h2. And then, potentially, now that the kings are also castles, so the king on e1 is not anymore weak, the knight on e4 and potentially the pawn behind can be really under attack. But now we have another situation. Bishop on d6, challenging the bishop, offering a trade. As we said many times, trading here is beneficial for black because usually they have an harder time to develop all the pieces. So this move makes lots of sense. Also, the bishop cannot go back to g5 because that square is controlled by knight on e4. And so, in a way, white cannot really avoid the trade unless you have knight e5.
Knight e5. Yeah, that's very typical in these type of positions to play knight e5 and control this square because basically white is taking over this square and black is taking over that square. It's very typical in the Queen's Gambit type of structures. But after knight e5, I'm slightly concerned about move g5 again. It's a little bit more crazy, I would say, right now. But it does give black some options. And it's safe to say that this bishop is feeling a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, do you want to allow bishop takes f4, weakening the pawn structure of white? And yeah, maybe that's a little bit unnecessary. Typically, after a move like bishop d6, you want to go back to g3. But if you play bishop g3, then knight takes g3 is always a possibility. So one of the moves to consider here is obviously, do you want to trade, yes or no? Would you want to trade here, Lesia?
With white, I would really like to keep as many pieces as possible. So if I can avoid the trade, I would avoid the trade. I saw that Tan Shengyi just did a movement with her hand.
Oh,
I don't know
really?
if she was adjusting the hair or if she was starting to make a move. Because mostly there is one movement that is very typical. You move your hand and then you are not sure and then you touch your hair and you go back to think. And it's something that many chess players do so much. And I try never to do that because it shows some insecurity. It shows some insecurity there that you're making a move, but then you're second guessing. So probably she was just adjusting for real her hair, but this is a very typical movement that you might see the end going and then oops, goes to the hair and then goes back to think. This is showing some second guessing, but maybe not, maybe not. And I would try to keep the bishop. And
Yeah.
I think your move pointing out g5 after knight e4, e5 is very interesting. Because we can also show. I think it's not good. I say it seems like the king is getting too weak because it doesn't work after bishop g3.
Yeah.
Maybe bishop g3 is just safe enough. And the problem is that g5 will be a weakness long term. Now you're not winning the piece. And I was seeing after some trades, h7 might be hanging. Maybe there is even better than bishop g3, as we see with the evaluation bar. But after the trades, knight takes. We can
Yeah.
take on g3, pawn takes, bishop takes on e5. Of course, this is not first, but it shows that h7 could become a weakness. And right now, after the knight moves, that pawn would be hanging. But okay, let's try to understand what is the move that white needs to play after the move g5, Anamaya.
Yeah, let's have a look. So obviously the bishop is under attack, and if the only move with the bishop is not a safe one, you have to think of other moves where you're also attacking here the opponent, so that you basically shift the attention to somewhere else. One of the ways is either to capture something or simply attack. And then I'm starting to look at moves like bishop takes e4 or knight takes e4, or maybe a move like f3 to attack the knight. These type of moves. So let's see what happens if knight takes e4. Let's start with that, because you're taking that knight over here, but it's actually going to help here. Let's have a look. So I'm seeing so many captures. It's so hard to judge which one is the best.
I have the feeling that after pawn take e4, there are two bishops under attack, and so white might lose a piece here.
Oh wait, you're right. I figured that okay, yeah, that was a trade on e4, so that you're basically losing material like that. Okay, yeah, that we got that covered. Yeah. So you're simply losing one of the bishops because you cannot defend both, even though you're able to capture the pawns.
Yeah, that's why it's not a full piece, but is a nice achievement for black, of course. So what could we do? Bishop take e4 is a move that we might want to consider as well. And the idea now that is that black needs to choose which bishop to take and how to take. Because if you take on e4 with the pawn, then this would be pretty bad. g5 is hanging, and bishop takes g5 is pinning the... Let's put it bishop takes g5, because this shows like big problem. Now the knight on f6 is pinned. The knight on the pawn on e4 is hanging, and the knight is coming to e4, attacking the knight pin. So this would be like huge danger for black. So of course, let's go back after bishop takes e5. So black needs to take probably the bishop on f4 here. And then we already see that it's enough for white to just move the bishop away from e4. And the pawn structure that black got after this trade is not optimal. So it's not really nice that you opened up the g file like this. And your pawn on f4 is under pressure. If you take on e3, the f file is going to be open for white. And then white can play against your knight. The pawn on e7 is weak. The knight on f6 is weak. This is not optimal. The only problem that white doesn't have the dark square bishop, which would be an amazing piece on g5, for example, or on h6.
Right.
But still, the attack would be pretty strong here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the pieces will shift to the king side, and black will need to worry a lot on the king side. So indeed, this move doesn't seem very great for black for this reason. You also have to consider moves like f3, because this knight doesn't have any square. I mean, obviously you can take here on c3, but given the fact that you're opening up your king so much, you really have to play precise here and be careful. This knight doesn't have many squares available, so it can get trapped. And at the same time, this bishop, if the knight gets removed, you can take on g5, and black's position, black's king side, is extremely exposed. So for this reason, you don't want to play g5, but obviously you do have to consider it if it's an option, because your bishop is also under slight pressure.
Yes, indeed. And it's really important to consider those kind of moves that we saw just in the previous variations. Sometimes they can be very strong. So we have this on the board. It's exciting to see that knight to e5 happened. Rook e8, not g5. This move is challenging the knight one more time. And I really like the move h3. We said before that you might need this extra square for the bishop on h2. Also, this move on h3 is avoiding one of the black pieces to go to g4, for example, the bishop or the knight. So it's a very good move. Give some love to the king. So it's a multitasking, multi-functional move. I
Mm-hmm.
like this h3.
Yeah, I like it as well. It's very useful. There's not much else going on in the position. You cannot strike just yet in the center or on the other sides of the board. You're not in a huge rush here with the white pieces. So if you can play a useful move like h3, now is the time. And she timed this perfectly because now if any sort of g5 happens in the moment where it works tactically, you can always go back to h2. So you got that at least covered. And there's so many ideas in White's position here. I mean, as we mentioned before, White has a lot of space here and is able to create weaknesses in the opponent's position. One of the ideas in this type of structure is to go a3, b4, and then play b5 and put pressure on this pawn on c6 because this pawn remains a weakness throughout the entire game unless he gets to play c5. But typically, if you play c5, you're weakening the pawn on d5, and a lot of other problems will arise. So one of the main issues of black, surprisingly enough, looking at this position, is this pawn on c6, because once white will be able to trade this pawn for the pawn on c6, and after, for example, if the pawn gets to b5 all the way, and after b takes c6, b takes c6, this pawn remains a weakness, and it is probably one of the most annoying pawns to deal with ever because this pawn's not going anywhere. It remains a target for the rest of the game, and you have to hope that you get to play c5. And even if you get to play c5, it doesn't come without consequences. So that's exactly why I really dislike playing this position. But I do have to give credit to Alexander Goryachkina for really setting up a good piece development because the knight on e4 is very active. The bishop can still get out. Okay, not currently to f5, I would say. I would wait with that a little bit. But the bishop has a bit more prospects once again. So I really like what black is doing here. I'm curious to see what black will go for in next few moves.
Yes, indeed. This will be very, very educational. This is a very classical position structure. There has been so many games played, and the plan that you showed on Amaya, the so-called minority attack, is one of the most traditional plan in these positions. I really like the idea behind it because, in a way, we can see that is like an underdog attack because you have two pawns, the A and B pawn, that are attacking three pawns. But the idea, as you showed, is really amazing. You want to exchange potentially two pawns for two pawns, and then black will remain with one pawn that is backward. So it's like behind the pawn on d5, cannot be protected by any other pawn, and will be weak, will be a target. And so no matter which pawn will be the last standing pawn in the black queen side, it will be weak because sometimes black can even just take on b5 and remain with the b pawn. But then in that case, there are two weaknesses, the pawn on d5, the pawn on b7. So that's a very, very, very annoying plan for white. I totally agree with you, Anamaya. And still, why does black play this opening? There must be a reason. And the reason is that actually, as you pointed out, there is a very challenging move that is the move c5. That is a move that at the right moment can be very important. It's true that once you play c5, you make your pawn weak on d5, but you're challenging the center for real. And if white doesn't have a strong way to immediately attack the pawn on d5, you might be able to push even forward this pawn with the move d4 and
Mm-hmm.
exchange everything, liquidate the center, and get a very comfortable position with black. So this is a bit one way to react with black. It's not easy, and I feel like this position are much easier to play with white because white has a forward plan. You know what you do. Instead, black needs to play c5, but at the right moment. And sometimes it's not even c5 the right move. So it's less straightforward and it's harder to play. But for grandmaster level, they know the difference between the different defenses that you have in this position, and so they can find the right one at the right moment. And that's why this remains still like very good opening for black because it's very solid, is well studied. You know the plans, you know how to defend, and so it's a very stable approach for black. So I guess this is the idea. And this shows
Mm-hmm.
one more time that the players are not trying to strike the goal immediately, but rather get a stable position, a solid one, and get the chances when they arise, and not going for craziness too early.
Absolutely, Alessia. Now let's try to guess the move for black because me personally, I have a hard time seeing what the next move is of black because I really want to develop this bishop, but after bishop f5, I'm not entirely sure of what happens after f3. Knight will be under attack. This bishop will be very vulnerable. So maybe let's ask the chat, if you are playing with the black pieces, what would you try to go for here? Because I mean, you still have lots of pieces on the board, but not a lot of space, and that makes it so difficult to decide on a move here. What would you play here? Well, okay, we have a move on the board already, but it was not what I considered actually.
Yeah, it's indeed interesting. I mean, knight takes e3. I had the feeling that at one point the pressure on e4 will be too much, and that you have to move that knight away. So knight takes e3 is a move that you have to take into consideration.
Right.
And now it's very interesting how white captured, because white captured with the b pawn, meaning that the plan that you mentioned before is not going to happen anymore, because b4 b5 is not possible. You don't have that break point, but you got another one that is possible, c4. No. And then what's the idea is that you are challenging black to take a decision. After a move like c4, black can either take on c4 or stay with the pawn on d5. If black stays with the pawn on d5, you might take yourself on d5, and then again, one more chance. How do you take back? Do you take with the c pawn? Then the pawn on d5 will be weak, not protected by any other pawn. If you take with the knight, you give away the center. You give away the center. And yes, a nice arrow there.
I really want to go to c5, okay?
Actually, huge appreciation for Anna Maya having control over the board, because she needs to, go through every single move I say, and maybe sometimes I say something that she didn't expect, and then surprise.
I'm trying to follow, but yeah, it's.
You do great. Don't
thank
worry.
Thank you.
So going back to what we wanted to say, c4.
Yeah.
C take d4 and knight takes. Once the knight takes back on d5, white will have two strong pawns in the center, d4, e3. And so white has a good control of the center. Of course, as Anamai is pointing out, also tactically this might be a problem because the pawn on e7, h7 would be hanging.
My pawn. Yeah, no, that's why I actually find this move b takes c3 very interesting indeed for this reason, because she has a clear plan to play c4, and it seems like she's focusing mainly on the majority on the king side, which is interesting and surprising at the same time. Because I was actually wondering, what are the odds that we will see a move like g4?
Wow.
Because this move seems very appealing to me, specifically for the reason that if you get to play g5, typically you might feel like, okay, knight h5 and your attack stops, but the party is going to start after bishop takes h7, I'm telling you. So I would love to see move like g4, and I find it very difficult to see how black can deal with this. Maybe the engine is not so happy with this, but I think practically speaking, this is not easy to deal with.
Yes, indeed. This shows like how important it is to have space advantage. This knight on e5 makes this move possible, because without the knight on e5, this would be a completely different story. That the pieces will not be acting enough to allow this moves. Usually we say don't push the pawn in front of your king, and this is a very important general rule. But in some cases, especially when the center is blocked or semi-blocked, you can consider this side attack, as you don't have breakthrough in the center. And now, how is black going to open the center? There is one breakthrough, is the move c5, but it's not so immediate. It's not that all the pieces are going, all the center is going to disappear, then suddenly the king is feeling very uncomfortable. So it's one move that, from a practical point of view, is definitely a possibility. Also, we see the evaluation bar is like slightly in favor of black, but this means that this is definitely playable. And is something that can be considered. How would you go next with black? Because it's not easy to actually find a defense here.
Yeah, I agree. It's not easy. I guess one of the moves you have to consider here. Okay, I was going to say a move that
Maybe
was actually
h6?
blunder. Yeah, h6. I mean, the reason why I'm hesitant about h6, let's put it on the board, is because you allow g5. I do have to note though that after g5, you do have moves like knight h5, bishop takes h3. It's always hanging. You can take first if you want to. So h6 feels scary, but tactically it seems like it's working out for black, and the black doesn't need to worry about g5 just yet. But h6, it feels like one of the reasonable moves, knowing that g5 is not possible. So yeah, I like h6. Yeah.
Yeah, I have the feeling the pawn on h3 is pretty much weak, and that's why generally I have the perception that this is not what white will be playing. Because h3 is a long-term problem that white will also have, and so it will be almost tough to keep going with the plan of g5. And also, you know, at one point, you always need to be careful for a counterattack. There are some ideas. For example, last week we saw lots of Spanish, no? And in the
Yep.
Spanish, sometimes how black is reacting after the move h3 g4 is sometimes with the move h5. I checked it shortly and it's not working right now tactically, because the square on h7 is well controlled by the bishop and the queen. But usually the idea, I just mention it to say, is not working here. You play the move h5 to provoke the move g5. Then you go with your knight on h7, and then you play g6 and f6. And then all
Mm-hmm.
your other pieces are joining. The bishop on the light square is hitting on g4 or on h3, and you block the position on the king side. Your king is safe, and all your other pieces will be joining. So there is also a way to counterattack. In this position exactly doesn't work because the square on h7 is not available for the knight, and so yeah, this doesn't work. I also saw in chat your amazing emoticon, bishop takes h7.
Yeah, that's typically a Greek gift, but this time I'm not sure if the Greek gift will occur because it's very well defended by the knight. And yeah, I don't see black losing that pawn for the time being. But yeah, you can always keep an eye on it. And indeed, the bishop and queen are pointing towards h7, and that makes your idea sadly not so good in this position. But it is a very typical move to challenge this pawn on g4 and weaken white's king instead. Even more. I quickly wanted to go a few moves back when we were in this position, because I asked the chat what would you do here. I saw that someone said bishop f5 and we pray. I like that attitude to pray, but sadly in classical, I would say in blitz you can get away with praying and hoping that things go well, but in classical it often gets punished, or you're lucky or you get punished very very quickly. So I think after bishop f5, one of the main problems is that f3 will be played, and yeah, after knight takes c3, your bishop can get captured. I'm not going to take your knight just yet. And white will be enjoying the pair of bishops. So you're not losing material with the black pieces, but it definitely is not what you're looking for. And then another suggestion was to play, besides knight takes c3, which was also played, the move h6. And as we saw it, or I mean, we see it in the other analysis as well, that h6 is a move to consider. But what I really like about this move is that you're simply waiting. You're seeing what your opponent does, and based on your opponent's moves, you react on it. And since h6 is one of those very useful moves to play, you always give your king a square on h7. Maybe you play knight h7 at some point for any sort of maneuvering or other purposes. Maybe you want to play bishop f5 and park the bishop on h7. There's all sorts of ideas when you play the move h6. Maybe you even want to prepare g5. Who knows? It's all possible. But it's always a good idea that if you don't know what to play, if you're stuck in the position and every move you make feels like you're making your position worse, it's okay to make such a waiting move that doesn't weaken so much, but it's always useful to play. So, for example, in contrast, if you play a move like a6 to simply wait, Here, you're weakening the square b6. So for this reason, a6 is not so great. Your opponent will try to capture the square, take control over it, and put a knight on it, hopefully, potentially. But yeah, that goes to show h6 is not as weakening as h6, just to illustrate what a waiting move makes useful and which one is actually useful. So yeah, but okay, unfortunately, h6 wasn't played, but we see knight takes c3. And Alessia, we see a move on the board, c4. What do you think?
Well, I really love this move. I think we already showed the idea.
Mhm.
And I feel it's a very important, straightforward plan, a very direct, easy way to challenge the center. And it makes lots of sense. It makes lots of sense. Now black has already some questions and you need to answer in some ways. Let's try to put d takes c4 on the board.
Yeah.
Because you don't really want to take. I don't think this move will be played. It's not a total disaster, as you can see, but after bishop takes, you see the point on f7 already is looking a bit shaky.
Yeah.
And it's not the only problem, no? Also, the pawn
Mhm.
structure of white, I really love to point that out, e3, d4. White has the potential to keep playing e4, rook e1, rook d1, or rook c1 sometimes, depends where you want to place these rooks. Take control over the center and really enjoy a lovely position. So this is a bit what would be white's dream here. That's why after the move c4, let's go back to the current position, I think that this is not what we will see. And I'm expecting rather some waiting move and some moves that have a clear way to react at c take d5, because this is also white threat. We saw it already that after c take d5, black has two options to capture, either with the knight or with the pawn. With the pawn, leaves the pawn on d5 hanging, or well, not hanging, but weak for the next, for lots of moves, because that one is going to be there.
Mhm.
If you take with the knight, the pawn on h7 is hanging. Plus, again, you have the problem of the lack of pawns in the center, so white will have the advantage at the center of the board.
Right. So I really like c4 as well. We had a question in the chat. What about e4? It's basically the same idea to challenge this pawn on d5, but typically you want to keep your center pawns. If you're able to attack the center with the pawns a bit outside of the center, so for example, a c or f pawn, if you can play the move c4, it's typically better to challenge the center with one of those pawns than your own pawn in the center. Because if we put the moves on the board after e4, not only are you giving up the center a little bit, but also, let's say knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, well, you want to capture the pawn back, right? And then you're also losing the pair of bishops. And what's even worse for white here is that it's not even working tactically. There's f6. And your knight is going to be lost. So even if you don't take with the knight, well, with the pawn it's the same story. I mean, pawn takes e4, I guess you move the bishop somewhere, but instead of capturing. But obviously you're simply losing a pawn like that, so that doesn't really work out well. So for this reason, we'd rather play c4. Even if it would work tactically, we want to play the move c4 instead of e4, because let's have a look. As we mentioned before, after d takes c4, bishop takes c4, then you will get to play e4. And look how many squares you're covering with those center pawns. And that gives you a much bigger advantage than if this pawn would be on c3 or c4. Look how empty it feels like in the center. Now it's white controlling the center pretty much. So that makes it the difference.
Yes, indeed. I think you said it so well. And sometimes it's challenging it's tricky because you feel like, okay, let's attack the center. But indeed, you want to exchange the side pawns for the central pawn. So that's why from in this position, c4 makes sense from a tactical point of view and from a strategical point of view. But let's say, even if both c4 and e4 would make sense from a tactical point of view, in this position, you want to exchange the side pawn on c4 for the central pawn on d4, on d5. And Anna Maya, oh my god, I didn't expect this move to take on c4 because this brings the bishop on c4 so active, already
Mm-hmm.
pointing at f7, and now there is a clear problem in the next move for Alexandra Goryachkina, and she needs to solve. I'm expecting that she will play the next move very quickly because this bishop takes e4 was just so natural, and we saw Tan Changyi played it so fast. So I expect her to play the next move really quick. What do you think will be?
Yeah, there's not a lot of options, obviously, because you have to defend the pawn on f7. I mean, the first move that comes into consideration, okay, bishop e6 has been played indeed very fast. But yeah, bishop e6, it's one way to defend. There was also rook f8, but it's a really passive move. And I feel like bishop e6 is a very logical move, developing the bishop and trying to trade that bishop off the board.
And I guess that move is on the board, right?
Yeah, they played it. Yeah, I didn't do it.
That's great. So it feels like now there is one important question that Chan Shangyi will try to address. Do you want to trade the bishop or do you want to keep them and maybe bring the bishop back on d3? This is a very important point, and I guess that Tan Shangyi will be spending some time to decide exactly how to go on. I think, Anamaya, it's time for us to have a short break, and then we will be back to a very important position of this middle game. Here we see Tan Shengyi of the live camera feed taking some time for the next move. Is an important moment. And guys, this is the semi-final of the 2022 FIDE Women's Candidates. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2022 FIDE Women's Candidates. We are the semi-final game 2. I'm Women FIDE Master Alicia Sontermo. Wish I was Women International Master.
Soon.
And I'm with the amazing one and only Women International Master, Anna Maya Kazarian. And here we're back to the game, Anna Maya. What has happened?
Yeah, we have seen a few moves have been played. Let's have a look what actually happened, because we left off in this moment where Black decided to take on c4, which was a really interesting move, Alessia, because we were talking about how this might give White some chances in the center, and it's probably not what they're looking for to play, but they did decide to take on c4, and I have a feeling it's for the reason that they have a pawn majority on the queen side. So in the long term, Black might be able to create a pass pawn, an outside pass pawn on the queen side. And obviously White still has the center, so you can play e4 and push in the center. But on the other hand, the pawns are not moving so fast. So is it going to be beneficial for White that there will be a pass pawn on the opponent's side, and you're not really able to move your pawns in the center? That remains to be seen, of course. But for now, bishop e6 was played, and I want to talk a bit more about this move, bishop e6, because we were talking about how there's this pawn f7 under attack, and there's other ways as well to deal with this. One of the moves I would discuss here is the move knight to d5, because the thing is that after knight d5, you're blocking this bishop, and after bishop takes d5, c takes d5, this will help Black a little bit, keeping the pair of bishops as well. So you don't really want to commit to that. And you might think, okay, but what happens if I simply attack this knight? For example, a move like e4. Well, the problem is there's a bishop hanging, Alessia. So tactically speaking, it may not be so ideal. And you can, even if you want to, you can take this knight. You can take this knight, make sure that bishop takes f7 is not happening whatsoever. But this is a little bit too risky. So I feel like knight d5 would have been an interesting move to play, to say the least. Putting the knight on the better square as well, and attacking this bishop on f4. And you'll deal with this pawn on f7 later. You can always play bishop e6 and continue from there. But instead, bishop e6 was played. And it is a really interesting move, challenging this bishop and wanting to trade. How do you feel about the move knight to d3, Alessia?
I don't know, Anna Maya. I have a feeling I wouldn't have played this move. I was
Yeah,
telling
know,
you
right?
before the break. No, what will White do? Will trade the bishop or will keep it? And here with White, I would love to keep as many pieces as possible on the board. And the reason is the following. You pointed out so well that there is an unbalanced situation with the pawn structure right now. White has more pawns in the center. Instead, Black has the possibility to potentially create a pass pawn on the queen side. What does it mean? It means that the more pieces are getting exchanged, the more important it is to have a faraway pass pawn. That's why with White, I would generally try to avoid any trade. And the move bishop d3 is what probably I would have played here instead of knight d3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, bishop d3. Maybe we can try to put this on the board.
Yeah, let's do it.
Is just a natural move that keeps all the pieces on the board. And the idea is that now I have the bishop pair. I don't like that the bar went down. So this might be that there was a very important tactical reason to this. Maybe even c5 is possible. Or maybe any other move that challenges the bishop pair. Maybe even knight d5 now works.
Mm-hmm.
Which I have the feeling that probably this is the reason why White went with knight d3. So let's try to figure out, Anna Maya, what do you think is the move that Black is playing after bishop d3?
Oh, bishop d3, right.
Yeah, I just want to understand why is White not keeping the tension? Because if this works from a tactical point of view, this makes so much sense. Just keep the pieces and keep the tension, as you want to have control over the center.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, bishop d3 makes sense, as you said. But I think in a concrete way it doesn't work for the simple reason that there's knight d5, as you pointed out. You're attacking this bishop on f4, and there's also knight to b4. But unfortunately, there's a pawn h7 hanging, which I briefly missed. So knight d5 is not a move we can consider just yet. This is why you want to play h6 at some point. But if knight d5 is not possible, then I would focus on c5. c5, attacking this pawn on d4, challenging it, and yeah, you can at some point play the move knight d5 eventually. If you trade on d4, e takes d4, this square d5 will be yours with the black pieces. First, you played move h6, and then you're free to move the knight wherever you wanted to. So I think for this reason, bishop d3 wasn't played. This move c5 is really annoying to deal with, and it also reflects from the move that was played in the game, because knight d3, it is stopping c5 in a way, actually. So it makes a lot of sense that knight d3 was played. It's a surprising move. You don't really expect it to be played, but in hindsight, it makes sense because you're stopping c5. And in case of a bishop trade, you take back with the knight, and you have a healthy, normal position going on.
Yes, indeed. I understand the sense. There is a very concrete reason why you cannot keep all the pieces on the board, and this is a very good news for black. That's why you see the evil war is nearly equal. It's nearly totally equal because many pieces are going to be exchanged, and I think they also got exchanged. In this position, black has so many options. Bishop takes c4, bishop take f5, f4. So many trades are possible. Maybe all of them too. And at the end, the pawn structure is a bit different, but we saw already that black has a very easy way to challenge the center with the move c5. So I feel like if many pieces are going to be exchanged, this would lead to be maybe a quick draw, or maybe I'm wrong, and they will keep more pieces on the board and they will find some chances to create some interesting play.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. But black decided to take on c4, queen takes c4. So the light squared bishops are now off the board. And what does it mean for this position? I mean, I would say that I see black controlling the light squares more here. So it's interesting that they decided to trade the light squared bishops, but I guess it makes sense. I mean, this bishop of white is typically much better than black's bishop. Let's go back a little bit here. So it makes sense that black is okay trading this, and also you want to play b5, a5, and put pressure on the queen side as soon as possible. So it makes sense in a way. You also want to control the square d5 with your knight, or maybe play knight e4, moves like that. And that's actually what was played, queen takes c4 and knight e4. So not only is this controlling the square e4, stopping the pawns from moving in the center, but you're also attacking, threatening the move knight d2, forking the queen and the rook on f1. A very easy threat to defend, but you have to be careful here with the white pieces.
Yes, indeed. The forks are very dangerous, and rookie one is happening right away. I was really interested. I don't know. Sometimes the bar is not too stable. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Because it's going up and down, even if you make the best move. And the reason is because of the depth. We are currently having a depth of 20, and this means that the engine is not going too deep, so the evaluation might change. But we don't go max, because if not, our producer would the computer might explode, you know. So we want to make sure that the depth is. Oh, maybe our producer is actually.
Ooh,
I
we got
saw
it to
that
25.
Yeah, we got an higher. Let's go.
Ooh. Okay, let's go a few moves back to see what is going on here. We now have a depth of 25.
Which is a change, you know?
Yeah, it can make a difference, absolutely.
Yes, with my when I used to analyze my openings, I always my coach always said that 20 is too low, but 25 I can already take the best move of the engine for granted. Then, of course, the grandmaster, top grandmaster, go to just a sick depth of, of the engine, just going up to 60. But it's not really needed. For us to understand what is the best move, it's enough 25. So a huge clap to our producer that gave us a more precise engine.
Yeah, so let's have a look at this position. So, there seems to be a clear advantage here for white. Where is the advantage in the position here? Because it's very difficult to see what is exactly going on here. And I mean, there's a direct threat. So you either deal with that or you have some sort of counterattack somewhere. What would you say are the candidate moves in this position, Alessia?
So bishop take d6 is one candidate move. You
Yeah.
want to trade a bishop. And one idea of that move, just to go very simple, bishop take d6. If queen takes d6, you go with the knight on e5. And then you're counterattacking the pawn on f7. So this could be something very, already very direct. You're counterattacking f7. You don't care about knight d2. Actually, you say, yeah, please, go on d2.
Yeah, please
because,
play 92.
yeah,
I'll go here.
yes, and then the king needs to move, and then you are moving your rook away, and then maybe, okay, let's show something. Let's play king e8. Now,
Ooh.
rook d1.
Ooh. I'm greedy, Alessia. I want to take
Oh, yeah,
or move
that's
the
true.
queen.
I
want to do
show
something.
the smoother mate, but there are so many beautiful things here. Yes, that's fine.
Okay, let's go rook d1. I want to see the smothered mate.
Yeah, I wanted like to knight e4.
Mm-hmm.
And then the queen moves on b3.
Yes.
And now what if black just plays a random move? This doesn't work for tactical reason. Okay, a4. And now we go. Knight f7.
Ooh.
King h8. This king g8. This might win a queen, but you go for more. Knight h6. King moves. You can show it.
When you're winning a queen, look for better.
Yeah,
and there we go.
Let's go.
Yeah,
but there is also another
made.
tactic also important that Anamaya was saying. So we should see also that tactic. And
yeah, so instead of rook fd1, which is also a great move to play, like this is completely winning for white. But there's also, you can simply take on e8 for a simple reason that after rook takes, you have knight f7 check, king g8, you take the queen, and look, there's a lot of pieces hanging. I mean, this rook is hanging as well as this rook, but after rook, knight takes rook, and I think black should resign here already, being down a rook and no hope in the position.
Indeed. So well, let's go back to the position where we saw the possibility of trading on d6, right?
Yeah.
So this could be, this could definitely be a possibility. Bishop take d6 with the idea of knight e5. Knight e5, of course, doesn't work right now because the pawn on f7 is protected by the queen. That's why you might want to consider the in-between bishop take d6. What else, Anamaya? Do you have any other move in mind?
What else can we do here? Yeah, it's difficult to say. I mean, I don't want to move my queen because I feel like my queen is placed very well, and it would be a pity to move it back. And I don't see better square for the queen, to be honest. Rook fd1 seems like a logical move that was also played in the game, but our dear friend Engine was not too pleased with that. So yeah, unfortunately we disregard it, but I really like your move. I think bishop takes d6, seems really nice, especially because you have the move knight e5 followed after that. And other than that, I'm failing to see what else there could be. So I would go for bishop takes d6. It does feel a little bit strange because you're helping your opponent in a way where they want to trade pieces, but there's a concrete idea to play the move knight e5. So I really like this.
Yeah, I feel like this could have been a possible continuation. Also, you don't have to hurry with knight e5. Maybe you want to first remove and avoid the fork threat, like rook fd1 could have also be played here. After the trade of bishop, I meant. But it's the same. It's like many moves are possible. Rook fd1, knight e5. Just we get to a position that is very similar to the one that we will have on the board. We will get there very quick soon. And I feel like that white has some perspective as soon the heavy pieces are on the board, because f7 is weak, b7 is a potential weakness. As soon as black is pushing any pawn on the queen side, one will become weak. For example, if the b pawn is pushed, c6 would be weak. And it's not so easy to play the move c5. I feel like white will have to play really rook c1, rook d1, and try to make sure that there is not an easy breakthrough in the center. Because if the move c5 happens, then black fully equalizes the position, and then maybe black can start to play for a win. As we pointed out before, black might create a faraway pass pawn on b4, on the b file, or on the a file, and that could be very important for a potential endgame.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see what happened in the game. There was rook half d1 instead of bishop take d6, and then what happened next?
Bishop takes f4. Black decided to trade themselves, which is very interesting. I mean, now white has to choose. Do you take with the knight or with the pawn? And if you take with the pawn, you're obviously weakening your pawn structure, and it feels very necessary. But you do keep your move knight e5 in the position. Is it worth it? Probably not. I mean, this knight can maneuver everywhere, and after e takes f4, it becomes very clear that this knight can jump to d5, and nobody can get rid of that knight. Maybe this knight can, but at the same time, this pawn f4 becomes a huge weakness, as well as the pawn d4. So e takes f4 cannot be considered. So for that reason, you have to take with the knight on f4, and then suddenly your move knight e5 is not happening anytime soon. So this was an important move played by Alexander Goryachkina to take the bishop on f4. And yeah, it seems like they made a. I mean, it was a great decision, and it's hard to see how white can continue.
Yes, indeed. I have the feeling that the knight on f4 is less strong than the knight on e5. And so that's why black, sorry, the white knight on e5. So if the white on e5 would be stronger.
Right.
And so I have the feeling that that's why black captured on f4. Because in a way, you're making the knight less strong. Because let's face it, where is this knight going next? The knight might go back to d3 at one point. Because
Yep.
from d3, it's controlling the c5 square and potentially going to e5. So it was very well placed on d3. And that's why I understand the move of Goryachkina. She's trading another piece, and also making the piece on f4 a bit worse, because the ideal square is not on f4, I have the feeling. And now in this position is black to move? Or what is play? I think we have two more moves.
Yeah, we have two more moves indeed. Rook 88 was played, simply developing the rook and potentially keeping an eye on the square d5. And then a4 was played by Tan Zhongyi. How do you feel about this move a4?
I love the idea of a4, is taking some space. I know that chat loves this kind of moves, a4, h4. We have been discussing about this through the whole quarterfinal last week, so these moves are always exciting. And the idea is clear. You want to avoid that black can go easily with a move like b5, and maybe you really want to create a blockade. For example, if black would go with a move like a6, that would be really, really bad. Because with one pawn, let's put it on the board. Let's try a6. Then with one pawn, you might play the move a5, and one pawn is blocking 2, or nearly 3, let's put it that way. So it would be really, really important for white to go like this, to go for such a pawn structure. Then the pawn on b2 would be really, really weak. White can try to play rook b1, double the rooks, of course, without losing the pawn on a5. So would give white a very clear target. But of course, the move a6 will not happen, so don't worry about that. Let's go back to the current position.
It's good to point it out.
Yeah, sure. Let's try to think, what are the candidate moves, Anna-Maja?
Yeah, so what can black play here? I mean, black has a very comfortable position. I would say there are no real threats. Earlier we said in this game that the pawn on c6 can become a huge target, but look at the position now. The pawn structure has changed, and all of a sudden, I don't see how this pawn can be attacked so easily. I mean, you have moves like d5 that you need to take care of, but are we really afraid of the move d5? I wouldn't say so. So, for that reason, I mean, the first move that comes to mind here is to play knight d6. I mean, it looks strange to move your knight back, which is on a really nice square, but I just want to attack this queen. This queen gets so close to my side of the board, so I don't want to allow it to be here so close. But okay, we see that c5 has been played by Alexander Goryachkina. A really surprising move, I should say, because what do you do after a move like d5?
Yes, indeed. This is the so-called boom move. It's a move that is changing the... now Chess.com introduced the emoji palette. So there are all these animated emoticons. There is the bomb, there is the star, there is the coin. I don't know if you have tried to experience them.
Yeah,
And they're
I'm just
pretty...
terrified to use them right now because I know the bomb has an enormous sound. So unless it's not too loud, like, we can try to do it. But I'm very, very terrified.
No, I wanted to. I didn't want to use it now. I just asked if you use the radio while streaming or in other cases because they're kind of funny, But this move is it's interesting. The move c5 because it's a breakthrough. The pawns can be exchanged, and as we pointed out before, ideally black would really love to exchange the c pawn for the d pawn because if those two pawns disappear, then this would be really beneficial. Black can have the perspective to create a faraway pass pawn. The center of white is not too strong anymore, and just lots of files are getting open up. Trades of rooks or heavy pieces are possible, and any endgame would be very good for black due to the faraway pass pawn possibility. So if the move c5 works, this is very good. But as Anamaya was pointing out, what about the move d5? I think we have to consider this move, and we have to put this move on the board. I feel like this move, if this move works, white should play this. I see the bar going brrrr, so
Not
I
happy.
feel like will not happen. So let's try to figure out why is d5 making our fish not so happy. I feel like that pawn is a potential target. The pawn on d5
Yeah.
can be attacked by many pieces. And at the moment, that pawn cannot be supported by the pawn on e3 because the pawn is blocked by the knight on e4. So as long as the knight stays on e4, the move e4 for white is not possible. And so the pawn on d5 can be attacked. It's like an isolated pawn in the meantime, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have the feeling that might be a weakness. But what do you think, Anamaya?
Yeah, I also agree with this. This pawn on d5 becomes a huge weakness, and one of the problems is that you cannot push it forward so easily. And of course, now there's three pieces attacking defending this pawn. So there's a lot of coverage here. But what is the purpose of this move if you cannot move it forward? And I don't see this happen anytime soon. And at the same time, we also have a pass pawn on c5. And I would like to zoom in on this variation, this line, because what happens after a move like queen e5? Because I want to keep attacking this pawn, and I have a direct threat. I want to play knight to c3. And tactically, this might be beneficial for black because imagine white plays any move. Okay, let's say the move a5 for whatever reason. Now, all of a sudden, there's knight to c3. And okay, apparently the engine was not too pleased with it, but I still want to show the idea behind this because if the rook keeps defending the pawn on d5 and stays on the d file, for example, rook d2, there's tactics along this diagonal. You can play knight e2 check, so you're losing the exchange. So if you obviously move your rook away from the d file, you will be losing sides of this pawn on d5. So for that reason, I would say you have to be really careful here. Apparently, there was a better move than knight c3.
I really like the move g5 here.
Oh,
I feel like I first of all, I love your idea of queen e5, and then I started to see possible rook take e5 because, as you mentioned, the rook on e1 is hanging. Is just protected by the rook on d1. So if g5 works, and then you might have some possible knight c3 in coordination of rook take d5, that would be probably very nice.
I really
So
like
maybe
that.
g5 is a good intermezzo. I'm not sure. Of course, these moves can always backfire, and you see.
We're just going for equal position, so let's see. It's okay. Yeah, but I
It's not
think
too terrible.
yeah, I
Maybe
think
knight
the problem
d3.
maybe knight d3, and I think one of the problems here, funnily enough, maybe a5 was a useful move because c5 is becoming a weakness at the same time. So if black takes a pawn d5, white will capture the pawn on c5. But it's still funny to see that the move g5 is not like losing. You might expect, okay, but you're weakening your king so much, and you are exposing yourself to many attacks. But in reality, it's hard to see how white can attack here. So you can afford such moves in these type of positions. But indeed, there's an even better move than our moves. Can you believe that?
Queen c3? Okay, wait a second. Before going to that point, let's try to ask chat about this. I see that we have lots of genius in chat, and so let's try to find a move. Yes, I feel like there are so different options, and one needs to be the best one. Could be queen c3, knight c3, or what else? Anna Maya, do you have any other candidate?
Oh, maybe queen b2. I want to attack this pawn on f2. Is this a move?
I love it.
And then I want to go back to c3. If let's say queen b2, knight to d3, and then queen c3. Oh, come on.
Come on, okay. There is Obojo that in chat likes the move queen c3. So let's try to see, is queen g3 the move? Oh, I was getting excited. Oh no. Oh my god, guys. Oh my god, there is a genius, and his name is Hunga Mongoose. And the knight take f2. I think this move is just too strong, right?
Oh wow, we completely disregarded this. But indeed, after king takes, there's
Yeah.
queen takes e3. Wow. And after king f1, there's rook e4. So you're attacking the queen, and this knight is getting captured. And you're actually getting checkmated if you're not careful. So that is completely losing. What a move! Knight takes f2. Completely out of the blue. Knight takes f2 is a threat. And it's so funny that when you have a move with a different purpose, but this purpose that like the move you're going for is not as accurate, and there's a better move. But you weren't trying to go for this move. So what I want to illustrate here, I played the move queen e5 to try to play knight c3 and attack this pawn. But at the same time, I'm reinforcing some attack here on those pawns. So that goes to show how important it is to activate your pieces. This queen was not doing so much on c7. We put it on e5, and look how many opportunities we get from this move. We're attacking many more things than just this idea with knight c3. We're also threatening knight takes f2. So really nice find by you guys.
Yes, and the player that find it was super proud. He said is a 1300. He has a rating of 1300. But this shows that you guys, if you focus, you can find a very good move. So we are proud. We are proud commentators. Knight take f2, really a good find and nice move.
And yeah, so yeah, white hasn't actually made a move. I was thinking where we left off, but c5 was the last move still. So yeah, for this reason, this is why d5 after all is not a great move. Queen e5 is really annoying to deal with. And is there any other move that white can play after queen e5? Because a5 was obviously a random move I played. It might be one of the best moves considering that you're stopping those pawns from moving very fast. But it's hard to see how you can stop because this threat. Because yeah, if you play rook a2, you're losing material right away. And if rook f1, once again, knight d2, forking the rook and the queen. So this
it's really
is getting
funny.
tricky.
It's really funny that we both consider. I also was considering, okay, rook a2 and rook f1 as my first instinct, you know. But
you have to
really
defend it somehow.
Yeah, knight d3 can be a move.
Yeah.
But you leave the pawn on d5 hanging.
Yeah.
So you have to see. I mean, you might have some tactic things working out, but I'm not sure. So let's go to just the position after queen e5 and let's try to figure out what could be a possible move for white, because rook b1 as well doesn't work. Okay, of course f2 is. Oh my god, this is getting hard.
Maybe rook a3. So you're defending the pawn e3 in a way. Wait, but after rook a3, you also have queen b2. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, indeed. Maybe
Oh
now there is queen
no.
8, rook a2, and everything is
Yeah.
protected.
Yeah, okay, maybe this works fine. It's just
And then draw by repetition. Queen e5, rook a3.
I wanna go for more here with the black pieces. You know, if I have my queen so active, might as well make use of it and play queen c3. It may not give you so much, but seeing the activity, I mean, you cannot put your pieces in more active places. So yeah, this is probably the best defense for white. Simply playing rook a3, defending that pawn on e3, even though it feels like you don't you don't need to defend it. Actually, apparently there is a better move here as well. And I'm frankly shocked that this is not the way to defend, because if queen b2 doesn't work, let's see. Did you ever hear the rule of swapping the move order, changing the move order?
Mm. Yeah, of course.
This is exactly the same situation. Instead of playing queen b2 first, you take on f2 right away with the same idea. King takes and queen b2 check, taking the rook once again. The amount of threats in this position is actually insane. How can you even defend this pawn on e3 peacefully?
Yeah, this is getting really hard. I mean, now it comes to mind, maybe play the move rook e1, which sounds like it looks really passive. The pawn on d5 is protected just by the knight, or maybe yeah, rook d3 is not possible. So it
Yeah,
feels
it
like
drops
you
the
have to
rook.
defend somehow. I mean, maybe just you go back with the queen. This really is really tough.
Yeah.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
maybe you can check what Hanjin is suggesting here. I feel it's a good moment to
Yeah, yeah.
try to check out
Yeah, I
what would
quickly
be.
peeked at the engine when you said rook e1, and you're absolutely right. Rook e1 is the move, and it's a very sad move. You have to move your rook from the d file where it was so active, and this is one of the very few ways to save the position. There was also queen b3, which was less good, but the same idea pretty much. You're defending the pawn e3, and at the same time, you're also attacking the pawn on b7, which can be useful later on. But rook e1, the top move, and it's not a move you can play so easily. You'll have to play very precise here, and if you have to resort to moves like rook e1, that's not a good sign.
Yes, indeed. I think we understood really well why the move d5 has so much risk for white. And so let's go back to the current position. So we know that Tan Shengyi is taking time to think. I also want to do a short consideration about time management for now. We are at move 21. Tan Shengyi has 1 minute 7, 1 hour 7 minutes, and a move to make. And the current time of Goryachkina is 53 minutes. I would say the time management is pretty good. Already the position is simplified. Many pieces got exchanged. So we are fine from the time management. Also, we don't have anymore the huge difference of time that we had between Tan Shengyi and Katerina Lagno last week, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, now we have classical, and the 14 minutes is still quite a difference. But in this case, it doesn't mean that much, especially because the players are already on move 21, 19 moves left till they get another 30 minutes. So the players have played this game pretty fast, I would say. And it's very interesting. I mean, personally, if I ever have this type of time management, I will be super happy, and maybe be able to play my best chess like this, because I'm always at this point. I would already have 5 minutes left on the clock. So yeah, they're handling their time management really well, and that helps them a lot to spend some time in critical positions, like this one, because you have to decide what to do with the white pieces. If you play the move d5, it's a very committal move, and you have to calculate all those lines to make sure that d5 works out or is in your favor. And at the same time, you also don't want to take on c5 yourself. As we mentioned earlier, those two pawns on the queen side are so capable of a lot, since you can create a passed pawn there. And that's not what you're looking for with the white pieces. So it's important to spend some time here, because basically, if we look at it, if we think about it, the past 20 moves, they were pretty straightforward. As long as you know your opening and you know the plans to go for, it's really straightforward to make those moves, if you're familiar with the position. And those players have played a lot of games, they're very experienced and very well prepared as well. So it makes sense that they're doing, they're making those moves really quickly, and yeah, feel more or less confident in the position. Because if they weren't confident, you could probably notice that from the time management. But Alexandra Goryachkina spent quite some time, okay, not too much, but she spent 8 minutes on the move c5, which is a very important move. I mean, you have to decide what to do here, and you have to be sure that c5 works, in fact, because you cannot put the pawn back, and that is really important.
Indeed, indeed, Anamaya. Pawns are not going backwards. And I was thinking, like, okay, we need to find another move. D5 is probably not going to be played, because black would get a very nice position. So I don't think D5 will happen. Now the question is, what's next? What's next for white? One thing I want to point out is that there is not an immediate threat right now, because c take d4 is not a possibility. Because, oh no, my queen on c7, this queen would be hanging, and is not an incredible sacrifice. This would be just a queen loss. So c5 is posing a threat in the long term, but not an immediate threat. So white has different options. And I saw a suggestion in chat by Anaran, and he was suggesting the move f3. My first impression after the move f3 is, oh my god, because every time you push a pawn, you need to make sure what you're leaving behind. And there are many weak squares that you are creating, the square on g3 and the square on e3. Now the question is the following: are these weaknesses exploit? Can this weakness be exploited, or not? Because if they can't be exploited, the idea is pretty interesting, because you might going forward with d5, e4, and then you have a very nice pawn structure. So what do you think, Anamaya?
Yeah, it feels like a move you shouldn't play, for exactly the reason that you mentioned. You're weakening the square g3, and the pawn e3 is also very displeased. But if we look at it closer, let's say the knight moves. I mean, where do we
Knight
move the
g3.
knight? Let's go knight g3. Okay.
Let's see this.
Well, I think I mean, I was going to say that this pawn e3 is hanging, but there's another target. This pawn c5 is also suddenly hanging. And I feel like tactically it works out for white, because you always have the move knight d5. So let's assume pawn takes c5 happens. If black decides to take on e3, you have to move knight d5, and you're going to lose in exchange. So for this reason, white is simply up a pawn, and it looks rather comfortable over here, I would say, for white. I would say black still has some chances to play around, because this pawn is still some sort of weakness. But I would definitely pick the white pieces here. I'm not too happy. How do you feel about it, Alessia?
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like I was reading in chat, never play f3. This is a very good rule, and we said it already last week. But this is something, rules are made to to be followed, but also
To be
not to be
broken.
followed. To be broken, yes. Because chess is a very complex game, and sometimes there are exceptions to rules. So the rules needs to be a guide, but not to limitate your potential as a chess player. So in this case, the idea of why never play f3, because f3 is mostly weakening your king. Now, when you consider this move in this position, you need to ask your question: is the king actually weak? And also, what is the idea of the move f3? Because f3 has a clear idea. You are attacking the defensor of the pawn on c5. So potentially you can win a pawn. In this case, if your king is not weak, the move f3 is fully justified. Because if you win a pawn, well, that's probably a good moment to break the rule never play f3. Uh, so the question is here, where to place the knight? Knight g3 feels not enough. Not enough for black, because the pawn on c5 is hanging. So probably black needs to go for something more sharp. Maybe knight d6, attacking the queen,
Yeah.
or what else could be, Anamaya?
Yeah, it's hard to say. 96 makes a lot of sense. Let's put it on the board. But I have a feeling that after queen takes c5, takes, the knight is under attack, and it gets really tricky in the end game. I have a feeling that white is able to consolidate and keep the advantage of being a pawn up. And since the knight is under attack, it's hard to see how he can capture this pawn quickly. So let's see what else do we have instead of knight d6, because it makes a lot of sense to put the knight there. Maybe we simply need to play something solid like knight f6.
Yeah.
Just don't commit to knight g3 or knight to d6 just yet, because that weakens the position of the knight in a way. And simply try to attack this pawn, because now if d takes c5, you can safely, okay, I was going to say, yeah, you can safely take, sorry, I was thinking of this move knight d5, but you're actually defending this with the knight on f6. So perhaps this is the way to deal with the position.
Yeah, indeed. I love the move knight f6, controlling the d5 square. And this is why sometimes it's really just very important for chess player to see if you move ahead. Because let's go back to the position with the knight on e4. It seems like, okay, f3 is weakening the square on g3. So we would like to bring the knight there. And it feels very logical. But if you then zoom in the position, try to calculate what is happening next, you understand that the move knight f6 is the best. And there is a reason, but you need to figure that out. And that's why sometimes I feel like that when we see at the engine, now the engine would say knight f6 is the best move. And one mistake that many chess players do while analyzing openings, analyzing chess games, is not to understand the reason behind moves. Because there is always a reason also behind engine moves. And this helps so much to learn openings in the right way, to remember better, and to just understand deeper the position. And so if we would say just, okay, best move of the engine, knight f6, probably playing solid, like just a very shallow analysis, this would be okay, solid, the knight is not doing much on g3. But then if we go more deep, there are some concrete reason, and we see why knight f6 is the best move. So having said that, probably f3 is a move that can really be considered, because if after f3 the knight needs to go back on f6, then white doesn't have the problem of knight g3, exactly. And maybe white can then consider to slowly build up the center, because again, the pawn on c5 is not challenging directly the pawn on d4. So maybe white can keep building up. I mean, e4 is sadly not possible because the knight would be hanging. The move d5, maybe again not really the good move because e3 would be hanging.
Right.
So just problematic. It's not easy to see what's next for white, because it looks like lots of problem to solve. How do you defend e3? How do you defend the knight on f4?
Right, exactly. And that goes to show, I mean, yeah, there's this weakness on e3 is really difficult. I saw a question in the chat, what about queen takes c5 instead? Because we analyzed d takes c5 and that may lead to some problems. What happens here? So queen takes, pawn takes, and yeah, there's a pawn hanging on the e3, but okay, it's black's move first. So obviously, if you capture the pawn right away, you're losing the rook, and you're not getting checkmated, but obviously losing a rook is not ideal. So you take on d1 first, rook takes d1, and now you're able to capture on e3. And you might think that, okay, but what happens after rook d8? That looks a bit terrifying, but it looks like you can tactically play this. I'm debating whether rook e8 or knight e8 is better, but I have a feeling just to play it safe, rook e8. And that feels a bit a bit weak, I would say, because rook takes, knight takes, and your knight is on the 8th rank, and this knight is on f4, pretty active. But given the pawn structure, I have a feeling that this should be around equal. Those pawns are not really going anywhere. The knight doesn't really have opportunities to attack the opponent's pawns very quickly, and in the meantime, this king will come closer and support the knight on the 8th, wherever it will go, whether that's on c7 or f6. So I guess it's safe to say that this position is around equal, and for that reason, queen takes c5 may not be so ideal. It feels like you're winning the pawn, but the pawn e3, it remains hanging. And Alessia, we see that Tana has played a move. She played a5. What do you think of this move?
Wow, it's a very interesting move. I really understand from a human perspective why the move S3 is not played. If we do probably we can say F3 was probably the best move according to the engine. But it's a very hard move to play from a human perspective. Because F3, Knight F6, you have so many problems to solve with white that doesn't look too inspiring, and probably even the best variation leads to an endgame as we saw, but it's just slightly better for white.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you don't want to take this risk if there is not a clear upside, and maybe the upside was not so big, so that's why Anshangi went for a much more solid approach, a5. What is the idea of the move a5? First of all, you're taking a bit more space on the queen side, and it feels like you are playing against the move b6 that is consolidating the pawn on c5. Also, white might maybe try to play the move a6 themselves. Could be an opportunity, because then the pawn on a6 is a very strong pawn. After a move like a6, let's play the move h6 here. And then let's put the pawn on a6. So basically here, black has two possibilities. Of course, I don't know if this works from a tactical point of view, but okay, evaluation is stable. So black has two possibilities, either to play the move b6 or to take on a6. I don't like b take a6 too much, because then the rook is getting really active, and both pawn on c5 and a7 would be weak. So let's play the move b6. The idea for white here would be that in the long run, the pawn on a7 is a target. And when you have a knight, imagine a knight getting to b5 in an endgame. Then if the pawn is falling on a7, that would be a really huge pain. Huge pain. This. And then the pawn on a6 is just 2 square away from promotion. So this is some kind of things that you want to start to build up in considering that an endgame might be coming soon. So this could be one idea, but also you don't have to go all the way to a6. You might just want to stay on a5 and playing against the move b6, and also the pawn on b7 is now a bit even more weak, no? Because cannot be advanced. Before could be advanced on b6 and be protected. Instead now you need to be careful about a move like b6, because it's true that you're exchanging some pawns, but then you're creating some weakness. Okay, you have the move h6 played, so
right. Yeah, so after a takes b6, for example, a takes b6, as you were really pointing out well, that in this position, the pawn b6 is not so great. It becomes a huge weakness, and it will be very difficult for black to push this pawn. So that's why you have to be careful. Rook a6.
b1. Those are all moves that comes to mind that are attacking that pawn. I don't know if they work exactly right now, but it's something that you need to consider. Also, 95 is a move. Let's just go one move back and just point out the ideas. 95, rook b1, rook a7. These are moves that are all looking really good. Playing really sharp against this pawn on b6. So, reason why I like the move a5, even if we saw that f3 was objectively maybe the number one move by the engine, I like a5 for a practical point of view. Let's go back to the current position with the pawn on a5. And Anamaya, what is the move that black is going to play here?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's, by the way, interesting to mention that Tan has spent 24 minutes on this move, and you might feel like that's way too much for a move like a5. But the idea, I mean, makes a lot of sense. There were so many different options, d5, f3, as we mentioned before, and those moves require a lot of calculations. So she spent 24 minutes, I feel like, very well, and she still has plenty of time for the remainder of the moves until the 14th move. But yeah, what would you play with the black pieces? I mean, I was not going to say h6, and we were actually just pointing out that, that was a simple random move to illustrate why a6 might be dangerous for black. But I love that they went for your suggestion a6 anyways.
Yeah, I mean these moves are very useful, especially when you are not weakening your king. This
Mm-hmm.
is some moves that you really want to play. I just don't want to make it just too general, because sometimes you also want to keep your pawn on h7. It's not always good to push the pawn
Mm-hmm.
h3 or h6. For example, we saw just a few moves before the idea of f3. And
Yeah.
if you want to go for f3, e4, then you don't play the move h3. So always try to have an overview of how you want to go on with your moves. And sometimes h3 can be a very useful move, but in some cases, you might want to push another pawn. And for example, there are many openings where you push f3 rather than h3. For example, open Sicilian, this f3 move is very typical.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that usually, as a general rule, if you want to create some air for your king, you rather want to push just one of the pawns in front of the king. With
Right.
two, you're weakening the king too much. But okay, in this situation for black, the move h6 makes lots of sense. You don't want to push g6, you don't want to push f6, so we can put this move on the board. It's pretty safe. To say that is a good move, solid, giving the king some space, and just waiting and saying to white, okay, what's next?
Yeah, right. And to quickly go back to your question, what are the moves that black could consider here otherwise besides h6? Now, the thing is that there's not a lot of moves possible without losing material or weakening the position for no reason. So it makes sense that Alexandra went for h6, but as I peeked in the chat, there was a suggestion, Alessia. The move b5 was a possible move here. Did you
Oh
expect
my
that?
god. Yeah, this is really nice because the idea is queen take b5, let's put this on the board, and then knight c3, and boom, nice fork over there.
Ooh.
But of course, white is not forced to take on b5, and we come to a very important move in chess, the en passant. When the pawn is pushed of two squares, you have the possibility just for this turn to take on b6, and I think this is the move that white needs to play. And then we get to a position that we have already discussed, a take b6, and 95 could be a very strong move, attacking the pawn on b6, followed by rook b1, rook a6, many moves are looking really exciting. Rook b1 doesn't look too good because of the possible fork on d2. So always, we understood that this knight on e4 can be dangerous, and there are many options that we always need to check out. Knight take f2, knight d2, knight c3. Oh my god, this knight is very strong. But okay, in this position, knight on d5 seems a very strong move. And so that's why b5 is probably not happening. So Anna Maya, let's go back to the current position.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw the move h6, and I really like the idea of this move, just waiting and asking white, okay, show me what's next. For white, it's not so easy to make a move. Every time you move one of your rook, you might create a chance of a fork. As we saw already, this could be dangerous. So I'm really curious to see which move Tan Changyi is going to pick here. She already invested 23 minutes, so probably this is a very good moment to go towards a break, and we will come back with the decision on Tan Changyi. Which move will she play? Now we see in the live camera she's taking time to think. The move h6 was not an easy move to face because the pressure is all on her. What's next? This is the semi-final of the FIDE women's candidates. We will come back with the answer to this question. What's next for Tan Changyi?
Just played an exciting game and want to see if you got a brilliancy? Or maybe where you could have improved? Chess.com's game review is just a click away. Game review is a fast, fun, and instructive guided review of your games. See your accuracy and your opponent's accuracy. Check out the eval graph for an instant overview and scroll down to see how many great moves, best moves, blunders, and yes, brilliancies you have played. Learn from Chess.com's coach who gives move explanations, opening statistics, and shows you the best lines of play. With retry mistakes, you can get another shot at finding missed opportunities. Try Game Review today on web, iOS, or Android.
And welcome back to the 2022 FIDE Women's Candidates. We are at the semi-final game 2. My name is Alessia Santero, my Women FIDE Master, and my co-host is Women International Master Anna Maya Kazarian.
Thank you, Alessia. We are back but in the game between Tan Zhongyi and Alexander Goryachkina. And Alessia, we see a move on the board. Tan Zhongyi played the move knight to d5. How do you feel about this move?
Wow, this is a very nice move. We have seen this idea already in other variation. We are considering the move b5, b6 for black instead of the move h6. But still, this move is happening already with the knight, with the pawn on h6. Knight d5 is attacking the queen on c7 and putting more pressure on the pawn on c5, because if the queen is leaving the pawn on c5 under not protected, then maybe we might see one more time the move we were discussing before, the move f3. Because let's not forget that the move f3 is always a possible resource. I was thinking like, how is Tan Zhongyi managing the time? And she's doing so good. I must say, she took 22 seconds for 22 minutes for the move a5. But then she found one more move very quickly. I just want to ask something. There was our producer suggesting one possible move. Instead of a5, to go directly with the move knight e5. So can we see what is the difference, if there are differences, and which move order is the best?
Yeah, let's have a look. So in case knight d5 is played here, it feels like the difference is very small, because I would love to have a5 included. Because let's look at the current position maybe and analyze from there. So after knight d5, what happens? So we can establish and evaluate the difference clearly. Because to me, it feels like when you include the move a5 and your opponent only played the move h6, which doesn't change the position too much, it feels like white got a better move on the board and includes knight d5 now. So let's have a look. After the move knight d5, what can black possibly play here? One of the candidate moves that comes to mind is simply play queen c6, for the simple reason that we want to keep defending that pawn on c5 and attack the knight on d5 at the same time. So let's see, what do we do here? Are we going to take on c5, or are we moving the knight? And I'm having a hard time seeing where this knight is actually moving to. What do you think, Alessia? Where would this knight be well placed? Because if I go back, it doesn't feel like I made progress, really.
Yes, indeed. That's why it's hard to understand the idea. But we have to consider, like, what are the candidates' move? Is there a way to protect this knight? So to keep the knight on d5, because that would be a very nice square. So for sure, the move d takes c5 is something that we need to keep in consideration. And also, just some possible tactics. One day, maybe knight e7 could be a possible thing. After d takes c5, let's play d takes c5 and let's do a waiting move.
Let's say with a knight.
Yeah, and now 97 is just a boomer. No, not a boomer, a banger.
It's a giga chat, knight on e7.
Yeah,
and
let's go.
Yeah, the trick is you're forking the queen and the king. So, well, you don't really want to lose the queen, so you take with the rook. But then the rook on d8 drops, and the white should be completely winning here, being up in exchange, and black doesn't really have so much to play for anymore. There's no counterplay here. So this move knight e7 is very strong, and at the same time, this move knight takes c5, it feels very logical. So if you cannot play this move knight takes c5, then we have to think about other moves. How about queen takes c5? So what happens there? This is basically challenging the queen, and on the one hand, you don't want to trade, but on the other hand, I'm feeling to see how you can keep the queens on the board without losing sight of your pieces. I mean, you can play moves like queen b3, but it doesn't really feel that great. This knight on d5 feels very loose. So let's say queen takes c5, knight takes c5, and what do we have here? To me, this seems pretty equal. I mean, black is not making a pass pawn just yet, but I also don't see how black can lose those pawns because of this knight on c5 being very strong, defending the pawn on b7. So I would say this position looks more or less equal. There's not much going on. If we go a few moves back, Let's see. So yeah, d takes c5 makes a lot of sense. But is there something better? As we mentioned earlier, knight f4, you'll have to retreat your knight and you don't really make a lot of progress. So perhaps there's not much more here for white. I mean, do you want to play knight to c3? It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. It feels so passive. What do you think, Alessia?
Yeah, indeed. It feels a bit passive. You're offering the trade of knights. The knight is not anymore in a very active square, and there is a difference in this position. Now the queen on c6 is not anymore unprotected. It's protected by a pawn. So you need to consider moves like c take d4. I'm not sure if this works right now, but it is definitely a possibility, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I really don't like the move knight c3. It feels too passive. If you go with the knight on d5, you want to keep the knight there. So I feel like if the move knight, let's go just back. If the move knight d5 is played, yeah, the move d5 is on the board. So if the move queen c6 will be played, then I have the feeling d takes c5 will be the move
Yeah.
played. And after queen takes c5, as you said, maybe here we might start to see if there are other moves for white to keep the tension. Maybe moving the queen on b3 or on a2, if it's working from a tactical point of view, that would keep the tension. The pawn on b7 it would be under attack,
Mm-hmm.
and still the knight on d5 is not fully stable. On d4 would be perfect because it would be protected by the pawn on e3. But still, the knight is doing fine now on d5.
Yeah.
It's not easy for black to double the rooks on the d file. For example, we can. Oh, I wanted to show like rook d7 and then the knight d6, knight f6 check. But unfortunately, it doesn't work because the knight can take back and protect the rook. So it would work if the pawn needs to take the knight, of course. After knight f6, pawn take g take f6. In that case, this works, but not doesn't work. So
Mhm.
probably rook d7 is an option then to protect the rook on the pawn on b7 and to double the rooks on the d file. So this position would be also around equal. I
Mhm.
feel like the pawn on b7 is still a weakness. White has a good control over the center, and so for the meantime, white has a very slight advantage. But it's very hard to see how can white do something more in this situation.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you try to move the knight here, so by playing f3, black will simply retreat to d6. So your move knight f6 will simply not happen, and black should be fine there. If we go back a little bit, we were talking about how knight d5 right now could maybe be is either better with the inclusion of a5 or maybe not that much better. Let's have a look what would be the case before a5 was played. So let's see, what if knight d5 right now? What is the difference here? So let's say queen c6 will be played. Are we seeing any sort of difference? Which position would you prefer, Alicia, with or without a5?
That's a very good point. Honestly, very interesting question. Also,
Mm-hmm.
I have the feeling that the move h6 is for sure useful for black.
Right.
For sure, for any endgame, that move is useful. Now I'm not sure as well about the move a5.
Mm-hmm.
If in any position the move a5 is useful, so we have to calculate. We have to see some lines, and then we will decide if it's actually more better to have the pawn on a5 on a4. So let's try to do the same. D takes c5.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's say queen takes.
And now queen takes c5. And now, yeah, okay, let's see this endgame first. I'm not a fan of exchanging queens
Me
generally
neither.
because it's like liquidating lots of material and also lots of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So this position, probably the difference will not be huge, as the pawn on a4 is now under attack of the knight, meaning that the rook on a1 cannot easily leave the a file. So probably the move a5 would be important to play. But let's go back at two
Yeah.
moves before the queen trade. And let's play queen b3 then. Let's play queen b3. Now the pawn on b7 is under attack and is like the same position. And honestly, I have the feeling that in this kind of position, the move h6 is much more useful than the move a5.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of have the feeling that maybe I would have preferred this knight d5. Of course, it's just very subtle things because still, sometimes in chess you need to ask yourself, um, there are actually in chess there are these two kind of position, very dynamical position and very static position. Dynamical position are those kind of position where the tempo makes the difference. Imagine you sacrifice a pawn for an attack. In this case, if you have an extra tempo, well, that can make the difference between winning the game, giving checkmate, and not giving checkmate, and then have to defend a position with a pawn down. Instead, in this kind of position, static position, much more stable and much more calm, one tempo is not really making a huge difference. So we're really talking about very subtleties.
Mm-hmm.
And the move a4, the move a5 here doesn't seem like the most needed move on earth. So that's why I probably would have preferred knight d5.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I see your point, and I agree. H6 is indeed a very, very useful move at all times, and there's always background kind of ideas when H6 hasn't been played yet. So I really like your breakdown of this position, and I agree. Maybe 95 earlier would have been slightly better to play. However, we're now in this position where white played the move a5, h6 was played, and after knight d5 we have new moves on the board. Queen to d6 was played, and d takes c5 was quickly followed after that. Wow, queen d6 is a rather surprising move, stepping into the file of the rook on d1.
Yeah, but it's just in a way funny, no? That there is just nothing. So
Mm-hmm.
you sometimes you can take queen c6 looks more safe, but maybe queen d6 has more option. Maybe you remember at one point we saw the possibility of a queen e5 at some point. So probably the reason of Alexandra Goryachkina is probably that queen wants to go somewhere. Now if queen takes c5 will be played, nothing changes.
Yeah.
The question is, can knight takes c5 be played?
Yeah, can it be played now? That's a really good question because earlier we saw that it didn't look so great because of knight e7 tactics. But with the queen on d6, knight e7 cannot be played whatsoever. So let's put the move on the board. Knight takes c5. What can white go for here? Because, well, knight e7 doesn't work anymore. Can we maybe attack on the queen side? Can we put pressure on this knight? The thing is, I want to move this knight, right? But if I play a
Mm.
move like knight to b6 to attack this queen, there will always be moves like queen takes d1, and black will be able to capture two rooks for the queen. And those two rooks are going to be really strong, really active. There's also a knight hanging on b6 that you need to. Actually, you're losing this knight because the knight is defended by this pawn. So after a takes b6, black will have two rooks, the knight, and white simply only has the queen. And okay, they have a pawn, but this pawn is not going anywhere. And I would be really concerned if I was playing with the black pieces here, with the white pieces, I mean. So for this reason, I cannot move my knight. And that changes things because I really want to attack the queen. So maybe one of the ideas that can be considered here by white is to move the rook to d4. Focus perhaps on the king side by moving the rook to the g file at some point. And maybe there are some tactical ideas there. But for the time being, it looks like black can hold on and there's not much danger in black's position. You always have moves like knight e6, and those are very safe moves.
Yes, Namai, I think you said it very well. Black position should be safe. One more option that I see for white is to actually move the knight, but not on b6 where you would lose the knight at the end, but rather keep it on f4 or on c3. Rather choose some safer possibility. Because for example, let's put it on f. I don't know. I have the feeling f4 is more active.
Sure.
It's hard to say it without going through some more precise calculation, because
Yeah.
of course now you're attacking the queen, and if the queen takes only one as we saw before, then the knight on c5 would be hanging, right?
Yeah.
So then the question is it good or is it bad? And this could be another option. Also, the idea of knight c3, if we move back the knight, could be knight c3, could be to go towards b5 and then d4, which we said is like the very safe square for white, is where ideally you want to place your knight. And it looks just just great. And the knight on b5 goes there attacking the queen with the tempo. And once more, actually this is actually very good because queen take d1 is not possible anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. Knight c3 is also defending the rook on d1, so queen takes d1 is out of the question. But yeah, you're not making a lot of progress because I feel like both sides have a really comfortable position. There's not much going on, really. You can safely play a move like, I mean, okay, where do we go with the queen? I guess you can play moves like queen e7 or queen c6. I don't know. It feels very much decent. Maybe even queen e5. I mean, there's so many squares to consider here for the queen, as long as you're defending that knight. That's really important. But it feels like black can easily do that. And what does white have? I mean, you can try to put pressure on those pawns, as you mentioned earlier, with the move knight b5, but black can easily defend this, so there's not much to worry about. So for the time being, I would say that the position looks pretty equal, but you never know. Things might happen. And we see that knight takes c5 has indeed been played. This is the current position.
Wow, that's super exciting for us
Mhm.
because we are predicting very well. So maybe now it's a good moment to stop one more time and to ask chat, what do you think will be White's next move? Because this is a very critical moment. We see that the board is slightly in favor of White. It's like nearly half 0.5, no? 0.4 maybe. I can't read the exact number.
Oh yeah, it's 6. Yeah, 0.6.
0.6. Okay, it's not such a small advantage. So it might be that we have something here. And the move knight f4, knight c3 doesn't look convincing. So we need to find a way to keep the knight on d5, where it's very strong, and to add more pressure on black. The knight on c5 right now is protected just by the queen. So can maybe a move like rook ac1 be a move?
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot because you're attacking the knight on c5. Let's put it on the board. Rook a to c1. So you're attacking the knight. If the knight leaves, you always have opportunities to infiltrate. Okay, maybe after knight e6, it will be hard to infiltrate on c7. Oh, I actually blundered. There's knight f6. Now it works because the queen cannot capture anymore. So for that reason, knight e6 is not good at all. What else do we have? So then it becomes really interesting because if the knight goes to e4, for example, I have queen c7, and after trade, I go on the 7th rank with my rook, maybe. Then it becomes really tricky. I mean, queen c7, let's put it on the board, and it looks like this knight is not getting lost just yet. You
Hopefully.
always have checks. Sorry, what did you say?
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah, it looks very loose, but for the time being, I see knight e7, knight f6 kind of idea. So you always have this check on the king. And once the king, for example, moves, let's say king h8, I mean, of course, there's some pawns hanging, but to illustrate, you can always play rook d4, and then your knight can safely move around. But this looks pretty worrying for black, I should say. To have a rook on the 7th rank here is very dangerous for black. And for this reason, I mean, you're attacking this knight, there's not a lot of options that you have. You might have to resort to moves like b6, but I don't really get too happy about that either.
Yes, indeed. The move b6 would be giving a clear target, no?
Right.
B6 is a potential pass. Is a pass pawn. It's a
Mhm.
potential strong pass pawn, and I think this might look like the endgame of yesterday. Yesterday, black had a pass pawn on the queen side plus a bishop versus one extra pawn for white on the king side and the knight. And Goryachkina defended very well. Was very good for black. But this is completely different because now there is knight versus knight, first of all, and
Mhm.
the pawn on b6 is not going to be pushed easily. b5
Yeah.
is not going to happen, and black needs to find coordination with the rooks and with the queen. Right now, the queen is still on the same file as the rook on d1, so you always need to be careful. There are some
Mhm.
potential tactic with knight take b6 that you always need to check out because the pawn on b6 is the one that is protecting the knight on c5. So, for example, maybe we can already imagine a move like this. The problem is that after all the trades, even if this works, queen take b6, rook take d8, rook take d8, we take on c5, The problem is that even if this works, okay, if rook d1, we can still make king h2, so we
Yeah.
don't lose the queen.
Yeah.
Even if this works, let's exchange the queens too. Just queen take, queen rook takes. This handgame is a rook handgames with 4 pawns versus 3 pawns, and this is a big chat theme. This endgame should be theoretically a draw, but it's actually a fight. Even grandmasters are playing on in these endgames because it's hard to defend. With good defense, it should be a draw.
Yeah.
But you need to fight. So this could be a possible outcome of this game. It's not like the most exciting thing for white because probably should still be a draw, but you can play for a win here. And there are
Mm-hmm.
games where grandmasters have lost this with the black pieces, so could be a possible, not a big deal, but possible scenario.
I'm curious, have you had experiences with this endgame either from white's perspective or black's perspective?
Yeah, I've played this with white, and my opponent defended really, really very well, so it ended up in a draw. Did you?
Yeah, I had this quite a few times, but I remember I have one win, and that was really satisfying. I mean, I'm not supposed to win, of course, because this is a theoretical draw, but I was able to put pressure on my opponent and slowly but surely convert it to a winning position. And that was so satisfying. It actually started in a Slav, funnily enough.
Oh.
So it had a similar type of vibe, but I was playing with the black pieces, so this pawn was here.
Oh, I see.
And it was a black pawn. So yeah, funnily enough, it was pretty similar, but in a way. But yeah, it feels good to be able to convert it to a winning position because it goes to show how tricky these kind of rook at games can get. It's really hard to defend. It should be a draw, but making it a draw is not a challenge, and it's not that easy.
Yes, indeed. And then Amaya, I was thinking, that probably online this situation might have happened. And I was thinking that I probably won also the 3 versus 3. But not
Mm.
because of the position, but because of the flag.
Hey, it
This is
counts.
something will not make Kramnik very excited about, but it's something that that can happen, unfortunately, in fast chess, speed chess.
Yeah, that's what you're signing up for when you play such time controls, right? But yeah, today we have classical, so flagging is very much very unlikely to happen, but there are still circumstances where it happens, but those are really rare. Let's go back to the position because knight takes c5. After knight takes c5, we have a move instead of rook ac1, which we were considering. The move rook d4 has been played. So rook to d4, as we discussed earlier, it is making sure the rook is safe, so you can always move the knight around wherever you want it to, and you're potentially setting up a kingside attack with the pieces, the heavy pieces. So maybe you will also involve this rook to the d file, and then, for example, queen c3 might be an idea to put pressure on g7, and things might start to get a little bit shaky on the king side. Black can still definitely hold on for some time, but let's see how both sides will deal with the position, because I'm curious to see if Tanjongi will go for this line and how Alexander Goryachkina will actually deal with this.
Yeah, this is a very spicy continuation and suggestion that you made there. I really like this rook left on the 4th rank. Rook g4 looks like a very interesting idea. Of course, you need to make sure that the knight on d5 is protected, but you can prepare it, no? Rook ad1, and then rook g4 can already be played, no? So I find it spicy. It adds a new target, a new potential source of attack. So I like this. It feels like the game will have a slow approach one more time. It also feels that even if let's not get too excited about the move Queen G4 because it feels there is a way of protecting that. But Black might have to do some awkward moves. For example, if we can imagine a rook on d1, after rook g4, an easy way to protect the g7 square, right, like 96, is a big problem. We saw tactically that once the rook is on the same file as the queen, you cannot interfere with the queen because you always need to look out for knight e7 check and knight f6 check. Already from this position, we can remove the arrows and show that always you need to show you need to look for knight f6 and knight e6. These are possible tactics that might win the queen. Of course, they are not working because the queen itself might capture the knight, no? But if the black knight interferes on e6, then the tactic is working. So this is always a tactical theme in this position. What do you think will be the next black move?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I really want to play knight e6, but as you mentioned, if you play knight e6 and knight f6, then you'll have a huge problem. It's really hard to say what black can actually play here because it feels like with the queen on d6, it doesn't really feel good. You want to move the queen around safely. The knight isn't really placed. I mean, it's placed on a good square, but the problem is it doesn't feel safe there. There's always rook c1 kind of threats. And there's much more harmony, I would say, in the white's position. The rooks are really strong and can really pose attacks, pose threats, whereas black's pieces, I mean, they're placed well. It's just that they're very vulnerable, and you don't really have a lot of squares available for your pieces. I mean, yeah, you have to keep defending the knight on c5. And at the same time, yeah, you're on the same file as the rook on d4. So yeah, I'm not sure what are the candidate moves of black. I mean, I guess b6 is one of the moves to consider to defend the knight. And wow, rook e4 has been played. I did not consider that at all. But it works tactically, Alessia.
Oh my god, I have to say, this move was suggested to me by our producer Bick. He said, what about rook e4? I must admit that, guys. Bick saw this move before Goryachkina played. So it's a very fancy move, no? A pretty creative way to try to liquidate some piece and reduce the pressure. Again, we saw those ideas with rook d1, rook g4, where white can suddenly start an attack on the king side. So rook e4 sounds like great if it works. Of course, I was a bit scared and double checking if technically everything works out. But it looks really fancy because let's try it out. After rook takes e4, the problem is that now the knight on d4, on d5 is also hanging. So probably you first take on e4 with the knight, and after knight takes, queen takes d5. And now you are getting to an endgame where really there is not lots of fight. I see the bar just staying in the middle and not moving away from the middle, not even a tiny bit.
I'm trying to see if there's a tiny difference. Maybe there is a small milli advantage for black, but no, I don't see it.
No, don't see. Okay, that's that's a very exciting position then.
No, it seems like the players are trading off the pieces. I mean, here's the thing, right? Let's be real. White is the one putting pressure here. All black can hope for is equalizing the position and getting the draw. That's typically how it goes when you're playing with the black pieces. It's hard to go for an advantage or hard to fight for something. And it's clear that if you don't do anything, as we pointed out, rook d1, rook g4, rook queen c3, and there's a huge attack going on. It's really difficult for black to defend this, and you have to play very passively in order to defend. So that's when moves like rook e4 must be played in order to maintain the solid position and be able to equalize. And yeah, you're basically stopping this rook from d4 to going to g4. And yeah, if you take knight takes, the pieces will simply be traded off. And this is exactly what black is looking for here. I do wonder though, are you forced to take on e4, or is there maybe a better move for white? Because that might make things a bit more interesting.
Yes, indeed. That's a very good point. Let's go to the current position, because I have the feeling you don't have to take on e4. At least you can try to see if a move like rook a1 is working. You are protecting the rook one more time, just to be ready, you know, after the trade, to make sure that your knight on d5 is protected. Because if not, that could be a problem. So I feel like if you don't want to take on e4, you have to consider one way to protect the knight on d5 one more time.
Mm-hmm.
And this seems to be like one possibility. Another possibility to keep the game going on is to take once on e4. So let's go back. So you can take once on e4, and then after knight takes, you consider another move here. And the idea is that you don't want to exchange also the knights, but try to keep them. The problem is like where to go with the knight. You also have rook d1 here. If that works tactically, this could be another move. I'm not a huge fan of that. It feels like just a bit unnatural.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, if you move the knight, where are you going? On f4 again?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it starts to get a bit shaky. Knight f4 and okay, this knight is under attack, of course, so you have to figure out what to do there. But I am not sure if this pawn f2 is having a good future ahead because it can be attacked quite easily. However, the knight is under attack, so we need to sort out that problem first. I guess the candidate move would be either queen e5 or queen e7. Let's try to go for a queen e5. What would happen here? Because the idea is simple. I mean, besides defending the knight, I'm attacking the rook, and also I want to play rook d2 to attack the pawn on f2. So, yeah, is this really worth it for white? Do you really want to head into such a position? Because I'm not so sure how you can deal with all the threats.
You're so right. Actually, you were super resourceful here, and with few pieces, you find some interesting resources. The pawn on f2 is a weakness, and a nice way to win a tempo with the queen attacking the rook, and then suddenly the rook is getting on the second rank. And I feel like this is exactly what white will not do, because you cannot allow this. Even
Yeah.
if it's not like the biggest deal ever for black, it's something that suddenly you are the one under pressure, and you're the one that is defending and not playing anymore for a win. Instead, if we go back to the current position, here white is fighting with all the pieces. There is a rook on e4. Now there is a trade offer, but white is the one fighting for more, for something more. And moves like rook ad1 are a possibility. I feel did this move happen?
Yeah, it did happen. So, yeah, the trade did not happen instantly. Instead, rook 81 first, and it does seem like a really reasonable move indeed. We see the rook trade now on d4 instead, and this makes a bit more sense, right? Compared to the position we were analyzing, now there's a rook on d4, and white has maintained this advantage in the center. With the pieces, so you're keeping the tension, and it's hard to see how black can now strike here. As we saw earlier, black had a really nice position, was able to attack all the pieces pretty much, but now it's hard to see again because knight e6 is not a move because of knight f6 again. So it's hard to see how black can mobilize their pieces better.
Yeah, indeed. I just want to add one thing about the last moves for white.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a super important tip that I received was the following. Every time there is the possibility of trading, resist the temptation to trade first and rather make your opponent make the trade. So I just want to show two possible positions. Let's put the rook back on a1,
Mm-hmm.
and let's take on e4. Knight takes on e4, and then let's move the knight. So if we see this position, it's so sad that our rook is on a1, we exchange the rook, our knight is much more passive on f4 rather than on d5. And this is why, because we made the trade, we improved the knight from c5 went to e4, where it's much stronger because he's attacking f2. Instead, if we compare this to the current position, it's such a different story. We let black do the trade because black is the one that wants to trade pieces in order to simplify the position. Now we have a strong rook on d4 that is protected by the pawn on e3. This means that the knight is free to go anywhere. Plus, the knight on d5 is super strong. Plus, the knight on c5 is less strong than how the knight would do on e4. So it's crazy how small differences, like just don't be the first one to trade, can make a huge difference in how the position is.
Yeah, very well said, Alessia. And that goes to show this rook on d4 is so much more active. And now Alexander Goryachkina played the move queen to f8. And this is exactly the problem in in black's position, I mean, because black's pieces have a hard time staying on strong squares, and now the queen has to go back. I mean, it didn't really have to, but there's all sorts of ideas in white's position here, and you simply don't want to stay on the same file as the rook. So queen f8 makes a lot of sense. It feels like a very passive move, but the idea is clear. You want to play moves like knight e6 without losing your queen. And later on, this queen will activate. It has a lot of potential. Once the knight is on e6, you can think of moves like queen a3 or maybe even queen c5. And black will be able to consolidate much easier. And since we have so few pieces left, so few heavy pieces on the board, it will be much harder for white to attack on the king side. I mean, considering moves like rook g4, it's not so easy for whites to start pressing because we put a knight on e6 and good luck attacking.
Yeah, that's true, but I feel like white still has some pressure here.
Absolutely.
I still like, I was thinking this queen on f8 is a bit sad. Let's point it out. It's nearly in tears. And after rook g4, white might start to go on with e4, f4, f5, f6. Just YOLO, push them, baby. And of course, be careful about pushing, but this could be a possible follow-up here. And what now? Rook g4 is possible right now. Could be a move, and then e4 is also going to be a move after knight e6. Why not? I don't see any danger. The only danger that I see that you're losing a bit of coordination between the rook and the queen, so the rook could be like just a bit stuck there on g4. But doesn't feel like a huge problem because it makes your knight on d5 just much stronger. And I feel like white has pressure here, and so unless many pieces are getting exchanged in the next moves, we are going to see a big fight still.
No, absolutely. Maybe let's put those moves on the board. What happens after rook g4? I think first and foremost, you have to calculate what happens after queen d6. Are you going to repeat the moves, go back to d4? Because you don't want to go back with that knight. You want to go to f6 or e7. And it seems like now in this position, you have to go back, or you agree with the repeating moves. But if you play a move like e4 to support the knight in this situation, you can simply take on e4 and then your knight is loose. So black will be a pawn up and it will be very difficult for white to play here. So for that reason, after queen d6, e4 is not so great. And if you have to resort to moves like knight f4, you're not really making huge progress. You probably will be facing moves like knight e6. You don't even have to play that. But I mean, of course, black would love to trade pieces here to be sure that the king is safe. And also in the end game, black will have a much better situation given this pawn structure over here. We can create a passed pawn actually, and for white that might take a bit longer time.
Yes, indeed. Actually, for white might be just not really a possibility because this weakens your king so much trying to go for e4, f4, e5. It's really so long time, and your king is also weakened by those kind of moves. Okay, let's go back to the current position and see what can happen here. Maybe rook g4, considering your amazing queen d6 move. Not a possibility anymore. My YOLO plan. Maybe it can be delayed. Maybe we can prepare it. Because I like it. Maybe we can just wait for knight on knight e6 to go with the rook on g4. Because if the knight is on e6, then you can push e4. Because the pawn is not hanging anymore. So maybe we need to find a very smart waiting move here. How to do that?
Yeah, maybe, I mean, this may look very crazy and very weakening, but how about we start with f4? Because I want to play f5, and then we will continue with rook g4, and we will include f6, and, you know, if black doesn't do anything, white is simply cruising there. So f4, I'm curious to see what the black can do here, because it looks very weakening. And you might say, but okay, you're weakening e4, so moves like f5 might be dangerous because knight on e4. But after f5, look what a beautiful diagonal we have here. And there's all sorts of tactic nuances. I mean, knight e7 check to capture the knight. There might also be checkmate ideas around the position, but this looks simply losing. I mean, you're at least losing the knight over here after this check. So for that reason, f5 is not possible. So I'm not too concerned about the square e4 just yet.
Yes, indeed. This move is very interesting. I feel this kind of position, this kind of moves are very typical in this situation where you have a unbalanced pawn structure with an extra pawn on one side. White has the majority on the king side, and so you really would like to advance and create some weaknesses. And the more pieces are on the board, and the better is for white, because you can really create some chances of attacking, you know? Imagine that pawn getting to f6. Suddenly you have some important targets. 97 check comes is a possibility. You might provoke moves like g6, meaning that h6 is seriously weakened, and you want to give checkmate on g7. So maybe that queen then will be stuck on f8 to protect the checkmate situation. So of course that would be really giving white some nice perspective. I don't know if this will happen, if that will happen. Now we of course need to consider moves like 96, or what else could be played here for black. 96 look just a good move because you are attacking the rook. But on the other side, the knight on e6 is like making f5 happen with tempo.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm not totally sure.
Maybe I can convince you. After
Yeah.
if the rook moves, let's say rook d1, a very natural move, black might be able to play queen c5. Okay, actually, I'm not able to convince you because I'm simply allowing the tactics again. After queen takes, knight takes, there's of course knight e7 and you lose the rook. But yeah, there are positions where you are able to play queen c5, and that's obviously what black is aiming for. Sadly for black, this is not happening here. Can I simply play a waiting move then? How about king h8? I want to play queen c5 on the next move. Even if you play f5.
Yeah, Maya, I really like your idea. Is queen c5 is a very good defensive resource. You are avoiding e4, you are offering the queen exchange, you're activating your queen, and again, the knight on d5 is under pressure, all your pieces are looking active, so I think king h8 is a very nice preparation move, prophylactic move, avoiding all the tactics, and then queen c5 would lead to a very good position for black. This is maybe the reason why Tenshingi went for the other push. Not f4, but she went for e4.
Ooh. Okay. That's rather surprising to see because the idea was obviously to focus on rook g4 and start an attack potentially, but she's basically not committing to that plan, and instead she plays move e4. And this is I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? You want to keep defending that pawn on d5, the knight on d5, I mean, with the pawn. And yeah, the pawn was not doing much on e3 anyway, so might as well strengthen the position of the knight. And in case knight e6 happens now, you can always retreat d3, maybe even to d1, but I would want to stay on d3 so I can easily shift to the king side or maybe even on queen side. So yeah, this is an interesting approach from Tan, that's for sure.
Yes, indeed. And the move 96 is immediately on the board, forcing the rook to leave the square on d4. I feel like the idea of e4 is exactly in a way to make the rook free. Because now the rook doesn't have to protect anymore the knight on d5. The knight is stably protected by the pawn on e4. And so the rook can go towards other missions. I like rook d3, as you pointed out. The rook on the third rank does an amazing job leading towards the g3 square or b3 square, so can attack on both queen side and king side. Now the question is your queen c5 probably still not a possibility?
Seems
so
like
maybe,
it's not.
yeah, so what about your king h8 prophylactic defense, aiming for queen c5?
Yeah, you know, it is interesting because King H8 feels like a waste of time. Why would you do this? There's so much going on in position. You're a passive already. Why would you commit to such moves and allow your opponent to have another move where they can attack you? But in reality, if we look closer, this move Queen C5 is so disturbing for white. Imagine if Rook B3 is going to be played to attack the pawn on B7. I can still play Queen C5. And the funny thing is that, okay, this queen is under attack, so you have to decide, do you trade, yes or no? In case you trade, knight takes c5, look who's defending the pawn and also attacking another pawn and attacking the rook, not to forget. So this goes to show how resourceful king h8 can be and how this move queen c5 is so annoying for white. And it's actually played, Alessia. King h8 is on the board. Alexander Goryachkina noticed that this move knight f6 is really annoying in variations. She is preparing move queen c5.
Yeah, that's so exciting that a move like King h8, such a slow move, is actually the best move in this position. And it shows that sometimes you need to prepare and you need to play these prophylactical moves in order to then play such a strong move like Queen c5, activating the queen, offering trades. And I think like the variation that you showed with Rook b3 was so incredible in a way because suddenly it's black that has the chance to be better. Let's go back there.
True.
Because this might happen. Rook b3, queen c5, let's trade the queens. And now you were pointing out, no? The pawn on e4 under attack, the rook under attack, the pawn on b7 is protected, but there is another point. And I think makes the difference because black might win a pawn here. After you take the pawn on e4, the knight on d5 is hanging.
Right.
And this makes black win a pawn. So after rook take e4, rook takes e5, and here we get to a rook endgame with an extra pawn for black, which is not like easy to win, but there are chances. I mean, black is the one playing for the win for sure. Of course, here I'm not sure about rook e7. Yeah, rook e7 is a move attacking two pawns, but still, you get to an endgame with an extra pawn for black. Is it a draw? Is it a win? It's a fight. It's a fight. This is the right answer because there are games where black wins, games where white makes a draw. So it's a very good. Would be just great for Goryachkina to go for this endgame with an extra pawn, even if it's not an easy win. So I think like if we go back to the live board, we already have a move. Is not rook b3, but it's rook c3, which makes lots of sense. Because now the queen on c5 is not welcome. And
unfortunate. Yeah, and what was funny is that Alexandra wanted to leave the board for a short moment, and Tan Shongki played rook c3 as Alexandra stood up, and she had to go back to her board right away, which was really interesting to see. It's one way of putting pressure on your opponent when they are about to leave, and you just press the clock, you make a move, press the clock, and they're forced to start thinking about their next move. And we already have a move on the board, queen d6.
Wow, queen d6. Okay, this is it's interesting how fast you're playing. So the queen is getting activated anyway, not on c5 but on d6. And what do you think is the idea of this move, Anna-Maja?
Yeah, I think, the queen on f8, as we mentioned earlier, is very passive, and since you're now able to play queen d6 safely, with the move included of king h8, you're now able to play queen e6 safely, even if rook d3 will be played. You can especially then go queen c5, and it's hard to see where white's play is now. Queen e6 is not only activating the queen, but also stopping potential moves like f4, as we mentioned earlier. That could be one of the ideas of white. So now maybe you can even play knight f4 yourself and start controlling the position. So there's all sorts of moves now available for black, and it's hard to see what white's plan is.
Wow, I agree so much for you. This queen d6 is a powerful move, and I start to see some possible trades. So now the pressure is one more time on Tan Shangyi. If she wants to try to play for a win, she needs to find a move that is avoiding trades. We are at move 30, and lots of time, still lots of time on the clock, 20 minutes for each player. So this means that, here we see 19 minutes versus 24. The players are not in time trouble, but they need to take some important decisions here. And if they use too much time, we might get to time scramble very soon. So guys, we will have a very short break and then come back to the most important moment of this game. FIDE Women's Candidates is coming back after a short break.
Damon's legacy is built around his passion and focus. That academic component, yeah, you'll get there in time. But what we don't talk about is the impact that it could have on your character. You know, what's the level of confidence that you can infuse in a child who grows up in a single parent home and don't get to see their dad? So if I teach him that he's the most valuable piece on the game and in life, how will that change him? What about that young queen? You're gonna need courage because you're a young Black or Latin queen. And in this culture and in this community and in this society, things aren't equal, nor will they be balanced. But on a chessboard, you are the most powerful piece. On a chessboard, there's equality.
Hey, y'all.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2022 FIDE Women's Candidates. Here we see the situation on the board, the big match between Tan Shangyi and Alexandra Goryachkina. We are at a very important moment of this game. My name is Alicia Santero, I'm a winner FIDE Master, and my co-host is Anna Maya Kazarian, Women International Master. What's going on, Anna Maya?
Yeah, Alicia, we are in the position that we were talking about. Rook b3 has now been played. Let's move back where we left off, because Rook c3 was played, Queen d6 after that, and in the meantime, Rook b3 was played. And I was going to be so excited about the fact that Queen c5 might just be played, the move we were talking about, to trade queens and put some more pressure on this pawn on e4. However, Alexandra Goryachkina played knight c5 instead, immediately, without trading queens. Do you think she is trying to go for a win here, Alessia?
That's a good question. Either she's trying to go for a win, or is she's trying to go for trades one more time and for forced trade? Because now the knight is attacking the rook and the pawn on e4 at the same time. Meaning that maybe we might see the move knight take e4 on the board. Especially if the rook is not protecting the knight. So what could be a move here? Maybe a rook b5? It feels like strange somehow. The rook on b5, but it's a way to protect the pawn. Sorry, the knight on d5, meaning that now knight take e4 is not possible, right?
Right, yeah.
And I feel we have that move. I saw on the live feed comments.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yes, I
Rook
saw the
b5.
movement.
It's on the board, and I'm failing to see how he can defend this properly, because I would love to take on e4 still, but the rook is now defending the knight on d5 as well as the queen, so knight takes e4 seems much more difficult. However, you are able to play moves like rook c8 perhaps, but the reason why I'm concerned about moves like rook c8 is because rook takes b7. The knight is now pinned. Knight takes b7 drops a lot of material. Okay, maybe after queen takes c8, you still have knight d8, but obviously white is ahead of pawn, and this looks very uncomfortable for black. So rook b5. What are the candidate moves here? Because it looks difficult. Yeah.
I just saw something. If we can jump back to the position we were analyzing, because I saw a possible tactic at the end. I'm sorry if this will not work, but it was it's just exciting me. Let's put the knight on d8, and what about the crazy move knight b6 with the idea that if pawn takes, you push a6. You're just 2 squared away from promoting. The point why this might not work is that there are checks on d1 and then check back on d6. So maybe the king becomes too vulnerable. But I don't know, that idea comes into my mind. I see that now there is a way for black to stabilize and make a draw. As the bar is on 0-0-0. But I wanted to show this idea.
No, it's a really fun idea.
Yeah, we have a move on the board. Oh my god, this is shocking.
What?
Anna Maya, the knight is taking on e4. Oh my god, am I blind or that knight can be captured? Maybe the move is a6.
Yeah, after queen takes e4, there is a6, and this rook doesn't have many squares left. You can capture the pawn on b7, but the knight is simply hanging. So this might be heading to an equal position, Alessia.
Wow, this is I find chess very fascinating, and I think our viewers might think the same. That sometimes there are such an intense battle and lots of creative moves, and then after all the tension, the dust is posing, settling.
Yes, it's settled.
And then it's settled, and then suddenly it's a draw, which is like lots of fight, and then okay, a draw.
That's it. Yeah, it's very anticlimactic. And I mean, it's so funny because Alexandra Goryachkina has been playing such fantastic moves. Knight takes e4. Instead of playing this move queen c5 that we were talking about earlier to play queen c5 here, she went with the knight to c5, and she's now capturing the pawn on e4. She had this in her mind when she played the move knight c5, and given the fact that she is playing such strong and resourceful moves, it feels so sad when the game ends in a draw that way, right? You play such strong moves, you're the one putting pressure, but it is not leading to a win. It doesn't give you an advantage. But this is how she was able to hold on this entire game, because if she didn't play king h8, if she didn't play queen f8, if she didn't play this move knight c5, knight takes e4, White would have had such a great position and it would have been so much easier to play for White. But because she played all of those moves, she's able to hold on and keep the position around equal.
Yes, and Maya, you said it very well. She played so strong, but still, it seems like she's not playing for a win here. But even Magnus Carlsen, the #1 chess player, is not always winning any chess game. And especially with the black pieces, sometimes your task is, first of all, equalize the position. And then you can try to fight for more. I think we have more moves on the board. The knight on e4 is finally captured. Of course, this had to happen. And now I see let's see the camera on Goryachkina. We are waiting for the move a6. Will this move happen soon? I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, one of the moves that comes to mind as well is moves like queen c6 or queen d7. But what I don't like about this move is that it's too vulnerable to attacks. I would not want to risk it. First of all, if queen c6, let's put it on the board, queen c6, queen e7 might be played. And I'm not sure how that is looking like because there is so many attacks. Maybe it's still fine for black because you can capture and it doesn't seem like you're losing pawns actually with the black pieces, but it seems all right.
Yeah, indeed. Is again one more crazy line, but yeah, very. I'm looking forward to the move that Alexandra Goryachkina is playing. I think that she plays some very interesting chess that can be something that we all can learn about. Again, we saw before that she had a decision between knight c5 and queen c5. And in these cases, she always goes for the most direct and forced approach. She calculated that knight c5, knight take e4 is working, and that's why she went for it. Knight c5 was attacking the rook with tempo, so the rook was forced to move, and for her that was enough to liquidate the position. Now she's probably thinking about your idea of queen c6 too, because with queen c6 you're not touching the pawns, you're not making a weakness, and you keep the possibility of b6 open. But a6 is on the board. The move, the pawn has been pushed. I think this is the most direct way to attack the rook, to force the rook to move away, and then the knight on d5 is falling. Oh, where is the rook going? Let's put a natural square. Well, the rook needs to take on b7.
Yeah, you can play rook b6, but I guess rook takes b7 is the most straightforward because you're also attacking the pawn f7, which might be very useful as your pawn on a5 is also hanging at the end. Let's put the moves on the board. Rook takes b7, queen takes e5, queen takes, rook takes d5. So now your pawn on a5 is hanging. So in order to, you cannot defend it. So you have to think about something else and you'll have to capture on f7, rook takes a5, and this should be a draw. It should be a draw, but I've seen crazy situations where one side still managed to lose, whether that's white or black, because white can obviously try to create a pass pawn on the king side if they really want to, but at the same time there's a pass pawn here, so you have to play very precise here. And we actually see a lot of moves being played. Let's say this is exactly on the board right now. Rook takes f7, now played by Tan Zhongyi, and this is heading to a draw. Are they going to continue or accept the draw in the next few moves?
I'm not sure. I have the feeling that this is just not the dead draw that we might have if the pawn, instead of being on a6, would be on f6. Because that would be very dry. This gives black still some chances. You might want to place your rook on a1 and start to push that pawn. Ideally, you want to place the rook on a1, the pawn on a3, not on a2, not all the way. Because the square on a2, you want to leave that square for the black king. For the black king to run all the way to a2. And what is white task is to block this king to go there. You want to either keep the pawn on g7 under attack, or to just do a blockade with your pawn. So the move g4 seems like doing a really good job giving the king the square on g2, but also maybe potentially going for f4, king g2, king g3, and you're creating already a blockade. You know, we can highlight all the square e5, f5. All these squares are blocked, and the king cannot advance g5, h5 too. Okay, the king really doesn't want to go there, but still, it would be a nice blockade on the 5th rank. So I feel like this game is not completely a dead draw. There is still a possible fight. As you mentioned before, it's possible still to lose this. Probably black is the one playing for a win, as there is the faraway pass pawn, but it shouldn't be a big deal. Because the risk is that if the black king is running too far away, then black might lose the g pawn and the h6 pawn, and even if the a pawn is promoting, white will just sacrifice the rook for it, and then there are 3 pawns versus a rook. And I'm not sure who will have the best of it, especially with the black king so far away from the pawns. So, of course, there are some risk involved in this position. Reason why mostly the players are not taking too risky decision. This h5 is nearly a move that is nearly a draw offer, I would say, because you're exchanging one more pawn, and then things are not going to be a big deal. Maybe we are move 39 on Amaya, one move away from move 40. So either this game goes on one more move, 2 more moves, or it goes 20, 30, 40 more moves. What do you think?
I actually think the players will agree to a draw because the idea is basically you cannot, with white, move your king towards the pawn. There's no way you can allow this because in the meantime, black will try to push this pawn, and once the pawn gets to a2, I will give you checks somewhere on wherever their king is. There's also famous ideas where there will be this attack from h2, and that will mean that white cannot capture this pawn on a2, so you can promote. So all white needs to do is simply wait. It's very easy to wait and basically not commit too much. King h2, king g2, maybe king g3, but the most important squares for the king are to stay around. You can also try king f3 because the pawn is covering you, but this is already maybe a bit too much. You don't want to go all the way here because this pawn can go fast, and at the same time you also need to take care of your own pawns. So let's see what happens now because they are on move 40 and it's Alexandra's move. What will she decide to do? Because she can now put her king out, but at the same time, there will be moves like f4 possible. And as long as the king stays around in this corner pretty much, white should be fine.
Yes, indeed. I mean, there are so many moves that black can play, and all are really good. Rook a3, rook a1, rook a2, king g6. All the moves keeping the rook on the A file and moving the king are good moves. I mean, honestly, all the legal every legal move is good for black here. Of course, king h8 doesn't make such a big sense, but even king h8 is definitely possible. So Goryachkina is just trying either to pick the most stable move or just to, deciding which one is going for a straightforward draw. Because it's clear this game is ending in a straightforward draw if you exchange the a6 pawn for the f pawn, for example. But there is not an immediate way to do that. But yeah, rook a4, I like this idea. And you're attacking the pawn on g4. So maybe you might go for something like this. For example, if king h2. Okay, they are agreeing for a draw. We have... did you see an handshake?
No, I saw a stare, like a very brief stare from Alexander Goryachkina. And I was like, is that an implication of I'm okay with a draw? Because there was just eye contact, really. There was no handshake, nothing.
Oh my god, that's in a way shocking. I'm not sure, maybe we missed that. So I'm not sure. We have all the video, but I didn't see the handshake, which is like yeah, which is like mostly what you do after a game. No, you shake your hands and you agree for a draw. But maybe it's just maybe we just missaw it. I'm not sure. Let's not speculate on that if we are not sure. Alexandra Goryachkina versus actually Tan Shangi versus Alexandra Goryachkina, ending on a draw one more time on game 2. I was thinking that was very fascinating that actually Alexandra Goryachkina is the only one among the 4 players that won one game in the classical segment. And there
True.
was no victory. Alexandra Goryachkina was the only one winning against Kostenyuk at the game 3. So will we see again Alexandra Goryachkina win a game in this semifinals? Will Tanshangi strike, or will be 2 more draws and tie breaks? What do you think, Anamaya?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, this game was actually super exciting. You might feel like, oh, it was a draw, nothing crazy happened, but it was super exciting. The players made it really spicy, and it feels a bit anticlimactic that it ended in a draw because it felt like there was supposed to happen more, but we couldn't ask for more. The players simply didn't make any mistakes. So if the players don't make any mistakes, even though they're trying really hard to make the best out of the position, it's simply a draw, and we cannot ask for more then. But I have a feeling that those next 2 rounds, will be even more exciting because the stakes are super high, and I think the players don't really want to head to tie breaks. They want to finish it in the classical portion of the match.
Well, yeah, on one side, yes. On the other side, maybe Tan Shangi did so well during the tiebreak that maybe she's also fine with that possibility. We saw already Tan Shangi fighting the tiebreak against Katerina Lagno, where she did really well. But okay, let's have a look at the schedule, guys, because the appointment is not yet over. We are coming back on Friday. Actually, will not be Anamai and me, but will be an amazing team of Fiona and Tatev on Friday, December 9th. And time match begins at 2 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Central European time. What do you think will happen, Anamaya?
Ooh, it is going to be exciting for sure. I think Alexandra will now be the one pushing for an advantage and trying to win the game because she'll be playing with the white pieces. And as you can tell from today's game, she is very ambitious and rightfully so.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think each player will still have one chance to play with the white pieces. And we know that at very high level, the white pieces are the ones that give you the most chances. You can play your openings and try to have that slight advantage that gives you the opportunity to push for more. And then it's always about your opponent. Does your opponent give you chances or not? You need these small chances in order to convert a slight advantage into a victory. Will this happen in game 3? I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting, but I believe there is a rest day tomorrow for the players so they can check the games, and the next round will be on Friday. So I'm really looking forward to it. We will not be commentating there, but we'll have Fiona and Tatev join back for the action on Friday.
Yes. All right. Anamaya, thank you so much for commentating with me one more time. It's always a pleasure to do with you. Thank you for our commentator break. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, likewise, Alessia. It was a pleasure commentating with you today again. It's only one classical game, which is maybe a bit difficult at times, but it went very smoothly, in my opinion, and it was a blast. I hope you guys in the chat also enjoyed it because it was a very exciting game, and I can't wait to see the next game.
That's amazing to hear. All right, guys, this is all for game 2 of the semifinal. The show must go on Friday, December 9th, with the third game of Alexandra Goryachkina versus Tan Shengi. That's all for the semifinal gate 2 of FIDE Women's Candidates. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.
See you!